the strongest support of the Fourth Hokage. Welcome back, brave explorers of impossible worlds. We are excited to have you here to continue this odyssey together. Before we continue, everything you'll hear is pure fiction. So please don't try to replicate combat techniques at home. This wonderful story in all its rights belong to its brilliant original author. We are only the messengers of entertainment. Want another dose of adventure? Subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss a single chapter. And if you can't wait, our Patreon has exclusive surprises you'll love. Chapter 1, This Rebirth is Such a Bummer. Beijing, China's famously hot city, is a place where, in the heat of summer, if you don't turn on the air conditioning, you're practically courting death. But there's always a group of people who aren't afraid of the scorching heat, the irritating smell of cigarette smoke, or even hail in June. Yes, they're male or female, young or old, but they all share a common name: players. Because of this crazy tower-toppling game launched by a certain news site, the small internet cafes are often overrun by all sorts of players. They gather in groups of 3 or 5, yelling about team fights, and are incredibly busy. "Come on, Wang Meng, who is using YIY?" yelled, a roar that even seemed a bit out of place in this place already filled with shouting and yelling. This excitement wasn't entirely unfounded. The team fight had reached its most crucial moment. Wang Meng's Barbarian King, after unleashing all his charge abilities, finally reached the opposing mage. With 2 incredibly swift strikes from the legendary Barbarian King, the opposing bald mage decisively secured first blood in the fight. But as the saying goes, when a man is about to die, he needs someone else to take him down with him. Wang Meng, too, took the opponent's full attack and was severely weakened in the final moments, but he was the Barbarian King. No life, no loss. With a series of piercing roars, Wang Meng successfully activated his ultimate. Within 5 seconds, he was undoubtedly a true man. Okay, let's seize this opportunity. Although only one opponent had fallen, and he himself had been weakened, thanks to his teammate, Time Guardian Karen, he could hold out for at least 10 seconds. 10 seconds, enough time to destroy the world. As soon as his ultimate skill ended, the gay guy immediately. "Fuck you," Wang Meng couldn't help but curse. He had just unleashed his ultimate skill, and the gay guy actually gave him a big move right away? Isn't this a ripoff? He's still weak? So, the actual time he can actually output damage is less than 2 seconds. Pushing his hands, Wang Meng threw down his keyboard and mouse without any mercy, giving up resistance. This rebirth was really a ripoff. Why are young people these days so impatient? Heartbroken, Wang Meng closed his eyes, but after waiting for a long time, he still didn't hear the heartbreaking shutdown. Could there be a chance? Holding on to tiny hope, he squinted, letting a ray of light into his world. In fact, he saw more than just a ray of light, but also lightning. And fireworks. And that blazing, intense light of hope. "Fuck you," without hesitation, Wang Meng immediately turned and ran. What kind of light of hope? It was clearly the monitor that exploded, okay? Unfortunately, the god of fate no longer wanted to protect this idiot. In the blink of an eye, the huge, terrifying spark swallowed him whole, and all trace of his existence in this world disappeared. Hands, legs, waist and... Phew, my little brother is here too. This way, no matter what, this grown man has nothing to fear. Even if his face gets a few scratches, it's no big deal. Of course, it's better if they don't get any. Did a kind-hearted person take me to the hospital? Oh my, I definitely can't help but express my gratitude. Anyway, I've been unconscious for so long, I'm suddenly thirsty. Please stop tickling my butt, okay? While the baby's cry was loud and persistent, that adorable first cry piercing everyone's ears, including Wang Meng himself, of course. The first cry was just a request for some water, but after that, it was a full-blown sob. What the hell? How could you guys kill me, a pillar of our country, in just a matter of minutes? Aren't you just surfing the internet? Isn't it just playing games? How many college students don't play games these days? What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? What the hell? Death is death. A true man must die. Death can be heavier than Mount Tai, or lighter than a feather. Lighter than a feather is fine, at least I can die peacefully. If I don't, that's fine too. At least pick a nice place to be reborn in your hometown. What are those Konoha Ford protectors gleaming on those guys' heads? Is this a travesty? I wasn't a psychic before I traveled through time? Or a scientist? To be transported to a place where death is a matter of minutes. This rebirth is such a bummer. Rusu, are you okay? A gentle male voice suddenly entered Comrade Wang Meng's intelligence-gathering range. The face with hard stubble practically brushed against her own delicate, baby-like skin. What if it gets rubbed? It hurts, it hurts. This commotion naturally made Wang Meng cry even harder, but the woman still lying in the hospital bed smiled even more brightly. Nanmu, let me see our child, her voice still tinged with weakness. Even with the blood of the Uzumaki clan, childbirth was enough to devastate this young mother. The woman turned her head with some difficulty, and the man called Nanmu placed the child beside her. Only when she saw the child's face did Rusu, a new mother, finally smile with satisfaction. This child embodies my courage, the courage of the Senju clan. So, how about calling him Senju Shinayu? Yes, as you say. Huh? That doesn't sound entirely without merit. Wang Meng. No, it should be Senju Shinayu now. After all, this old man is an adult. After a brief grumble, he forced himself to calm down. Speaking of which, this guy has always been a very analytical type. Whether it's games or life, as long as it's doable, he can easily analyze the most reasonable solution. And if it can't be done, it's just that he can't do it. At that time, he's like a complete lazy person, completely unwilling to move. So, in this dangerous world, Shinayu must naturally find enough chips to survive. Senju. Although the Senju have disappeared into the dust of history by the time the main Naruto series begins, it was only because no one in the Senju clan awakened the wooden shield, leading to their gradual decline. Compared to the annihilation of the entire Uchiha clan, this is quite fortunate. And with the Senju family name around, surely his family wouldn't be in such a predicament. The cute little head shook helplessly from side to side, even his sparse eyebrows furrowing slightly. Aha! Mizuho smiled and smoothed the gap between Shinayong's brows with her fingers. Though she hadn't fully recovered her strength yet, the Uzumaki clan's physique meant this woman didn't look like she'd just given birth. You're quite the troubled child, huh? Her smile was filled with sweetness. Chapter 2, Chasing Stars should be done before becoming famous. For Shinayu, time flies by incredibly quickly. The 6 years since he arrived in this world seemed like the blink of an eye. Born in Konoha's 23rd year, by the time he finally came to his senses, it was almost time for school. Okay, Shinayu admitted that he had watched Naruto in his past life, but compared to those who knew every character's birth date in detail, he only had a rough idea. How could he possibly survive in this world where death could happen at any moment with just that kind of general knowledge? Shinayu, it's time to eat. From the large house with its own waterside pavilion, his mother, Mizuho's gentle voice rang out. Ah, this virtuous, red-haired woman was from the legendary and mysterious Uzumaki clan. Their strong constitutions and vitality gave them almost cockroach-like survival abilities, but this gift from heaven ultimately brought disaster upon them due to human greed. Around 2 years before Shinayu was born, the once peaceful Uzumaki clan met its end. Konoha, as their ally, provided them with their utmost assistance. My father and mother probably met during that rescue mission, right? From that perspective, I could barely be considered a powerful second generation. After all, I'm a descendant of the village's first Kage. Even apart from that, my mother's potential as the last descendant of the Uzumaki clan would have put me among the village's nobility. And while I haven't received the same level of attention as the descendants of the Uchiha or other prominent families in those fleeting 6 years, after all, with the death of the second generation, the Senju clan had largely withdrawn from Konoha's power. I've nevertheless been a well-known prodigy in this not-so-small village. This talent wasn't reflected in the number of powerful ninjutsu he'd mastered, or the sheer power he possessed, it was simply due to Shinayu's precocious intelligence. In the ninja's impression, this little one's thinking was closer to that of an adult. Shinayu, I'm coming. Dusting himself off, Senju Shinayu slowly stood up in response to his mother's call. Those lazy days were probably due to 6 years of disappointment. What about the Senju clan, the Uzumaki clan? In those 6 years, Shinayu hadn't even sensed a single ounce of Yang-style energy, let alone the legendary wood-style technique. If things continued like this, his dream of descending into a flower tree world in his left hand and wielding a giant jade-like Rasengan in his right hand would be impossible to achieve. Shinayu, remember to get up early tomorrow. Mizuho tilted her head, gazing at her child with the doting caress of a girl who hadn't grown up. Huh? After a moment's thought, is it the anniversary of you finally becoming a woman over 30? Crack. It was like something suddenly shattering. Mizuho's expression remained unchanged, but those gentle hands had already touched Shinayu's face. "Shinayu, you're so naughty," a sickeningly sweet voice. And then, a pinch. "It hurts." "It hurts?" A pinch. "Oh, it's Konoha. Enough is enough," a twist. Gumenase, suddenly sitting up straight, suppressing the pain on his face, Shinayu apologized solemnly. And with that apology, the inhumane torture finally ceased. "Hey, Shinayu, tomorrow's the day you go to school." Well, in this world where ninjas are the mainstream profession, of course, they mean going to ninja school. In fact, most children from well-off families in Konoha attend ninja school from a young age. While the ninja profession carries danger, it also carries high income and status. Becoming a ninja is undoubtedly the best way to gain a relatively respectable social standing in Konoha village. Even if one truly isn't suited to the ninja profession, or lacks ninja talent, it's still possible to pursue other avenues after graduation. Besides the essential knowledge of ninja schools also teach the skills necessary for normal life. This refers to times outside of war. In this era, despite the signing of armistices, many ninja villages haven't yet emerged from the shadow of war. Minor skirmishes, provocations, territorial disputes. Aside from those who have suffered crushing defeat, the 5 major ninja villages still retain considerable strength. Amidst the turbulent undercurrents, they are simply gathering strength. Peace seems fragile and false. Against the backdrop of this Cold War-like arms race, Konoha's ninja schools certainly couldn't afford to remain naive. In fact, Konoha's advanced talent development system was already widely known during World War I, but the true strength of this system was demonstrated during the Second Shinobi World War. The ninja hero Sarutobi Hiruzen, the 3 ninjas, Konoha White Fang. The tiny village of Konoha has produced so many powerful individuals. This is why, in this era of the end of myth, Konoha can still stand alone against 4, even though none of this has yet occurred. As the wheel of history turns, a new generation of geniuses is born, for the next war. Although the Hokage belonged to the Senju line, with the Senju lineage now out of power, did you expect the Sandaime to treat Shinayu any differently, kindly calling him over and saying, "Young man, I see you have extraordinary talents. Why don't you accept me as your disciple?" Shinayu curled his lips. That was clearly impossible. Compared to the Uchiha geniuses who had already awakened their Sharingan, or the descendants of Konoha's various prominent figures, the Sandaime had no reason to favor him. He hadn't even seen a ninjutsu scroll. Add to that his adult mentality, while the other children were dazed by the Sandaime's speeches, he was the only one who looked listless. Being woken up so early in the morning was already annoying, but he'd only reluctantly come here, thinking that studying at the Ninja Academy would at least give him some financial security, and yet he'd spent the entire morning listening to the teachers and this old man rambling on. What a waste of life. He glanced around idly, perhaps because they were all just kids, and the future figures were hard to distinguish. Actually, it wasn't like he couldn't recognize any of them. For example, that unusually plump guy. Don't get me wrong, Konoha village wasn't short of plump people, but this guy was definitely overweight. A child of the Akimichi family, right? Well, now that he'd recognized him, he couldn't let him go to waste. Shinayu decided to make a good friend of his. After all, judging by the current situation, surviving on his own in the years ahead would be incredibly difficult, so having someone he could rely on was crucial. As the saying goes, it's better to have a close friend than a friend. If he could build good relationships with Konoha's powerful men, his future would surely be much easier, right? And if you became close friends from childhood, those relationships would surely be stronger. With this in mind, Shinayu began to stealthily move towards the plump guy, but after only 2 steps, he changed direction. It wasn't that he had given up on his quest, it was just that he had found a better target. A head of loose, golden hair flowed freely. Though still a child, with that chubby face still tinged with baby fat, that child's smile emanated a warmth and power. If anything, this little one exuded a sense of sunshine, like a little sun. The corners of Shin's mouth curled up. Even if one wasn't familiar with the history of Naruto, anyone with a passing knowledge of the character would recognize this character. In a sense, compared to those later monsters with devastating powers, this guy might be an even more powerful ninja. His only power was simply speed, and because of that, he was invincible. I've hit the jackpot this time, Focusing intently on what was ahead, Shinayu almost forgot he was actually in the center of the group. He'd almost missed the golden egg. "Hello, I'm Senju Shinayu." He stared intently at the sand dame on the stage, but then he quietly leaned his head closer to the boy next to him. The boy was clearly surprised that this bold fellow would whisper to him at such an important moment. He froze in surprise for a moment, but quickly regained his signature smile. "Hello," he began shyly. "My name is Namikaze Minato." "Ahoha," the boy chuckled triumphantly. Becoming friends with a future yondaime was truly worthwhile. From today on, we're friends, and so, the two children's friendship was officially established, and because they were children, everything was so simple, so natural. But they probably didn't realize how decisive this deliberate friendship would be in the war that would soon follow. Well, it was too far off to think about it now. Young Zenaion didn't know that the shadow of war was already very close. Chapter 3, Class Division is Really the Enemy. After the lengthy entrance ceremony finally concluded, the young children, all filled with anticipation and excitement, awaited their class placement and subsequent academic life. Yes, Shinayon realized he'd been way too sweet. Although he'd successfully hooked up and made friends with a future yondaime, his future career would be severely impacted if he wasn't assigned to the same class. Manga stories are all lies. How could there be only one class per grade in the entire ninja school? If all the strong guys were in one class, it would definitely be a class of nobility. Otherwise, how could the graduation rate be so high? And where did all those Jinan cannon fodder die? Why were all the Jinan of the same generation as the protagonist so incredibly strong? Well, after 5 minutes of internal ranting, Shinayon could only reluctantly agree with little son's wish. It would be nice if we could be assigned to the same class. Yes, that would be nice, Shinayon admitted, his smile strained. Shinayon sensed the world's deep malice, feeling as if his young mind had been cruelly toyed with. Alright everyone, let's start the class division. What system will be used? Will there be a preliminary exam first? Or will there be a direct practical assessment? Wait. Has the selection already been made? Filled with all sorts of anxieties, Shinayon forced himself to stare closely at the Chunin teacher as he pointed at them one by one. He pointed at the fat kid. Next up was that skinny guy over there. So, is this guy the Nara brat? And then there was the flaxen-haired guy. Yes, this must be the Ino Shikacho of this era. With my status, I'm afraid I can't be in the same class with him. He sighed in frustration, but then Shinayon cheered up. It doesn't matter. According to his memory, Minato seemed to be from a commoner family, so he wouldn't. Damn it. The unknown Chunin wasn't done counting people yet, muttering something like 39 while pointing his finger at Minato. Wasn't that a bummer? Even years later, recalling that moment, Shinayu could still empathize with the despair he felt. His best friend, everything was gone. He was bound to become a mere Jinan, and die tragically on some mission behind enemy lines. No, perhaps on a defensive mission, or perhaps on a transport mission? Or maybe on some random search for someone. Well, anything like that seemed like it wouldn't kill him. No. This was wartime. What if we were ambushed? Even if we weren't ambushed, there were still the occasional chance of someone falling from a tree and breaking their cervical vertebrae. In Shinayu's eyes, the world seemed to turn gray, and in Minato's eyes, this strange friend he'd just met seemed to turn gray, and then, a dramatic scene unfolded. Just as the future seemed bleak, a single finger rescued the young man from the mud. It was an extremely faint, yet unmissable touch, like feeling his father's hands for the first time since leaving his mother's body. Surviving a catastrophe? A life or death situation? No words could describe the excitement Jin-Young felt right now. It was as if spring had arrived on the frozen earth, and even the tear-stained little face was filled with a springtime vitality. 40, the Chunin-sama said. Then he turned and smiled at the 40 children he had chosen. Well, from today on, you are class 1. What does it mean to endure hardships and finally find happiness? What does it mean to find rain after a long drought? Six-path sage, I praise you, praise you. Jin-Young excitedly grasped the Chunin-sensei's finger. Due to his height, little Jin-Young had to raise his hands as high as possible to grasp the Chunin-sensei's finger, which was gradually slipping away. Teacher, Jin-Young's voice trembled. In that moment, he suddenly remembered a beautiful time in his childhood when he first wore a red scarf. Tears of excitement welled up in his eyes. I will definitely study hard in the future, live up to the expectations of my teachers and classmates, and strive to get into college as soon as possible. I mean, repay the teacher for his kindness. This sudden change shocked everyone. Nonsense. Who would have thought that when Kimura Chunin called out the students in the order they stood, 1, 2, 3, 4, and called out a class, such a strange person would suddenly appear? I really don't understand what children nowadays are thinking. Of course, no one told Henayong the truth about this matter in the years to come. The children would at most laugh at him and call him a crybaby, while the teachers would gently stroke his little head and praise him for respecting teachers and education. There are some things that are not so bad that you don't know them. Dividing line for the start of class, the little farce of class division was soon over. The children, full of curiosity about the ninja school, quickly forgot what had just happened and plunged into their intense and orderly study life. As the bell rang, all the children were like soldiers who had heard the call to assemble. Some were laughing and playing, some were chatting and joking, some were confusedly looking for the toilet, and some were crying for their parents. Well, a group of 6-year-old brats, what else can you expect from them? The most impressive thing about him was that he was just like those brats from the Uchiha clan, turning his face away with disdain, secretly complaining to himself, "These brats have no taste," while secretly practicing his hand seals, preparing to go home and coax a couple more lollipops from his parents. Of course, in order to fit in with the general public, when another brat asked Shinayu where the bathroom was, he decisively shook his head and then engaged in a lively conversation with Minato on the other side. During this time, the suppression of his IQ and EQ naturally gave him all kinds of indescribable pleasure, and at the same time, his status in Minato's heart rapidly rose. He had gone from a strange friend he met by chance to a knowledgeable friend who knew everything about astronomy and geography. By the way, Shinayu, what day were you born? Me, he thought for a moment. After all, although he had celebrated 6 birthdays, his other birthday had been over 20 years ago. Probably in February, huh? Little son blinked a few times in surprise. I was born in January, and I didn't expect Shinayong, who's not even older than me, to know so much. Where's that? Shinayong's gaze drifted past Minato beside him. After searching around, he finally found the red-haired girl in the other corner of the classroom. Not only do I know that the moon is always round, but I also know that pretty girl over there will be your wife. Well, I remember it was supposed to be round, right? Why did she show up now? Of course, considering the harmonious development of the village, Shinayong wouldn't discuss this matter in detail with the yondaime. Just as someone was internally pondering the great genetic puzzle of why yellow and red would turn into gold, Kimura, the chunin who had just been in charge of class division, finally walked into the classroom with a roster. Hello everyone, from today on, I will be your instructor during your studies at the ninja school. My name is Kimura Shimaneo. Well, please introduce yourselves one by one in order. From this moment on, Senju Shinayu's ninja school career officially began. Chapter 4, Could it be that I am the legendary martial arts prodigy? Hello everyone, my name is Yamanaka Inochi. Yes, I know you, the taciturn, 3-no guy. Hello everyone, I'm Nara Shikaku. I see, I know him too, with the same dead eyes as your son. Hello everyone, I'm Okimichi Choza, you little fat boy. Your son is truly incomparable to you. You're much fuller-bodied. Hello everyone, my name is Uzumaki Kushina. I'm going to become Hokage someday. Little hot chili pepper even though you failed. What's the saying? Men conquer the ninja world, women conquer men. Hello everyone, I'm Namikaze Minato. So soon, it's my turn next. Ahem. Hello everyone, in truth, even Shinayong himself didn't know what he'd said, because he was the last one to go on stage, and his friends, who were already familiar with each other, had already started chatting animatedly, with no intention of listening to him finish. Well, although Minato looked very interested, the ambient noise was simply too loud to tolerate. Finally, the embarrassing self-introduction session ended, and Mr. Kimura cleared his throat. That low cough was more effective than anything else, instantly quieting the group of noisy kids. After years of being tortured by the Jonin, Mr. Kimura finally regained his long-lost dignity, and his subsequent words were somewhat sincere, a role model for others. Okay, now that everyone has introduced themselves, I'm sure you've gotten to know each other a bit. The school rules and regulations were already explained at the assembly, so I won't go into detail. While everyone's been very active, I still hope that everyone can maintain basic courtesy during class. Okay, yes, a chorus of children's babbling filled the air, and Kimura-kun's majesty seemed almost to be on the verge of tears. Well, I trust that you're all obedient children. For today's first class, I'll introduce the basics of ninjadom. Of course, I'll cover the specific requirements in the following lessons. The most important part of today's lesson is teaching you how to refine chakra. Even though he had been dismissive of the previous material, Shinryu still had to force himself to listen carefully. After all, this was the first step to becoming a ninja. If he fell in a place like this, he'd never be able to get up again. Chakra. In the ninja world, this thing is the foundation of cultivation, just like the internal force in Chinese martial arts novels or the fighting spirit in Western fantasy. It's a must-have for those who can fly and evade the earth. Without it, not only can you defeat monsters, level up, open a harem, and dominate the world, but even running away, hiding, hanging out, or just sitting around can put your life in danger. Isn't it important? How can you become a taijutsu-style ninja without knowing ninjutsu? What a joke if you can't concentrate chakra. Haven't you seen that even poor kids Ioli can occasionally use the 8 gates ninjutsu to transform into a superhuman? Although my family's circumstances made it incredibly unlikely that I wouldn't be able to become a ninja, I had already encountered something as daunting as time travel. If some angel played another little joke on me, I'd be in tears. Please, make it happen. He gritted his teeth. The first experience was always nerve-wracking. Teacher Kimura's in-depth and easy-to-understand explanation soon concluded. Aside from the elite players from the larger families who had already experienced this and continued to stare blankly with boredom, almost everyone began experimenting with chakra refining. It was tight at first, and getting deeper became even more difficult. It was their first time, after all, and forcing it would be painful. But with continued friction and the rising body temperature, it actually began to feel more comfortable. Well, this first attempt at chakra refining and flowing through the body only lasted about 5 minutes, but considering the result, it was still a resounding success. Feeling the steady trickle of energy flowing through his body, Jinayong, having completed a full circle of the heavens, sighed with relief. Now, all he wanted was to look up at the sky at a 45-degree angle, light a cigarette, and exclaim, "I love this world." He believed that soon, he would find a powerful partner, receive a promotion and a raise, become a rich and handsome man, marry a beautiful and wealthy woman, and reach the pinnacle of his life. Thinking about it made him a little excited. Mayu-kun, Kimura approached the child, his face gazing at the ceiling with a look of ecstasy, a bit puzzled. The sudden, awkward moment in the hallway was still fresh in his mind. Now it seemed, this child was truly abnormal. Hey, besides Tsunadeheim, was there no more genius in the Senju family? Huh? Shinhei finally came to his senses at the teacher's call, realizing that his absence at this moment was a grave sin. There was nothing he could do. Since things had come to this, he could only pathetically prepare to admit his mistake to the teacher. What? He was caught skipping class for the first time. After finally getting his expression right, Shinhei hadn't even had a chance to speak when Kimura patted his head kindly. It's okay, Shinhei-kun. Refining chakra for the first time is difficult enough. Only geniuses can run a full cycle straight away, he said, smiling and gesturing at the surrounding children. Look, I'm afraid no one has succeeded yet. Don't worry, huh? He tried to look around. Around him, most of his friends looked constipated. Some of them secretly opened their eyes to look at Zenaiwang. Some were even mumbling to themselves. Even Minato beside him was just barely in a state of meditation. Could it be? Wait, I need to confirm it again. Teacher Zenaiwang pretended to be on the verge of tears and continued to ask, then when can I start the chakra cycle? How long does it take? Later, Zenaiwang, who was almost unable to hold back, couldn't help but reveal a bit of anxiety, but in the eyes of the teacher, it was just a child's competitive spirit. That's hard for me to say, Kimura replied with a smile. Everyone's talent is different. Generally speaking, the first cycle will be completed within a day or two of the initial refining. For beginners, it will take about an hour or two to complete a cycle. Aha, you're asking the teacher? I only need about half an hour to complete a cycle now, Kimura replied with a hint of pride, and was rewarded with a surprised face he had expected. So, he patted Jinayong's shoulder in encouragement and turned to leave. Although, he didn't know what Jinayong was surprised about. Indeed, at this moment, Senju Jinayong pinched his thigh hard. After confirming that he was not dreaming, A single sentence echoed in his mind. Nim? Am I one of those rare martial arts prodigies? You think this is the protagonist's cheat? You are too young. How could the existence arrange such a cheesy cheat? Chapter 5, Life's ups and downs happen too fast. Calm down, calm down. He kept repeating this to himself, forcing himself to remain calm, yet that sly, ambiguous smile still sent a chill down the spines of everyone who laid eyes on him. While it wasn't exactly a public knowledge, after the first day of school, almost everyone knew there was a strange boy in grade 1. But at that moment, Senju Shinayu couldn't care less. He even made a determined and rude decision not to invite Minato to his mansion, instead rushing off to his own little home the moment the bell rang. He had to quickly confirm with his father, a Jonin, the issue of his unusually high chakra refining speed. This was crucial to his future prospects. You had to know that total chakra production was a key factor in distinguishing ninja ranks, although it wasn't the decisive factor. During wartime, most ninja ranks were based on direct combat effectiveness. Even so, ninjas with high chakra production generally had a certain advantage in combat. Following this logic, even if he couldn't become a Jonin, he would at least become a special Jonin. Even an elite Chunin would be fine. Then, while family matters were at hand, he could take advantage of the situation and be transferred to the less dangerous internal affairs department. Okay, even if you said that thinking that was pathetic, in a matter of life and death, this little bit of pettiness was nothing. Knock, 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 a rough knock on the door, followed by someone opening it from the outside. I'm back. Wait, Jinayong, I've told you so many times, say hello when you get home. Jinayong clearly didn't have time to listen to his mother's nagging. He hurriedly dropped his school bag and ran to the living room. Although his mother could be considered a Jonin in every sense, men always subconsciously consult their father when faced with such matters, right? Dad, with a long trailing syllable, Jinayong's feet suddenly stopped, leaving 2 trails of fire. Yes, at such a critical moment, etiquette was thrown out the window. But there was a point in parents sometimes asking their children to knock before entering a room. There was no doubt that Senju Nanmu was a Jonin. Whether he was unleashing ninjutsu or throwing a kunai, his calloused hands never trembled. A ninja's profession was to walk on the edge of a blade. Failing to maintain absolute composure usually meant death. Why go on about this pointless nonsense? Across the coffee table, the man whom Shinayu should have called his father was comically trying to grab a book that had just fallen from his trembling hands. Each hand took turns approaching the target, but due to the constant trembling, neither man managed to hit the target. Instead, the dangerous little book was sent careening higher and higher under the anxious gaze of the young man. Plop! Gravity plays a crucial role in this world, keeping everyone grounded. Thus, the book couldn't escape the constraints of fate, landing very smoothly in front of Shinayu. Well, it's nothing, actually. While famous Naruto items like Intimate Paradise haven't appeared yet, Shinayu has already seen similar books. Compared to the rich imaginations of the great masters of his past lives, these are nothing. Ahem, Nanmu's face flushed for a rare moment. After all, no father could maintain his solemn and reliable appearance if his son saw something like that. Actually, this is the love we seized from the enemy ninja on our last mission. The father stopped mid-sentence with a crude excuse. Shinayu's teasing glare said it all. Obediently picking up the book, Jinayong glanced at his father with a look any man could understand, considering his mother, who was still preparing dinner in the kitchen down the hall. Then, with a serious expression, he personally handed the goods to his father. Father, things like intelligence are better kept somewhere more confidential. Nanmu was stunned, then nodded deeply. After accepting the book, a look of regret filled his face. He then declared that he would never make such a mistake again, lest his hard-earned intelligence be leaked. Of course, he also expressed his satisfaction at having such a sensible and law-abiding son, and said that he could always come to him for help with any future issues. Of course, the father and son then engaged in a warm, yet unproductive conversation. Ahem, back to the point. Father, I actually wanted to ask you some questions about chakra training. Huh? You're already learning chakra refinement in your first class, so you've skipped some basics? So, it seems you've been prepared. Nanmu's face still wore a warm smile, so warm that even Zenai didn't notice anything unusual. Are you having any trouble training? Zenai winked for a long moment before finally honestly reporting the rapid training speed he'd discovered today. Is that so? Nanmu frowned slightly, but soon relaxed. I think it must be your mother's bloodline. The Uzumaki clan has naturally large chakra reserves. He gently stroked Zenayu's short hair. But Zenayu, don't get too proud. Ninja training isn't just about chakra. Oh, right, Nanmu pulled a nondescript piece of paper from his ninja tool bag. Well, at first glance, it looked like a pH test strip, but as someone who watched the anime Naruto, how could Zenayu not know what it was? This is a precious pH. Pa, a chakra attribute test paper. How many chakra attributes will I have? Hey. Thinking about it, my parents are good at earth escape, water escape, wind escape, and fire escape respectively. It would be great if I inherited them all. Hey, this is a precious item called chakra test paper. Since Zenayu can already extract chakra, let's try to see what attribute it is first. Nodding heavily, Zenayu took the paper from his father seriously. Okay, now just input the refined chakra. What's wrong, Zenayu? The father and son stared at each other for a long time, because the situation before them was truly beyond Zenayu's expectations. Chakra test paper, due to its special material, will naturally show completely different reactions when penetrated by chakra of different attributes. Water attribute will wet the paper, fire attribute will cause it to burn, earth attribute will shatter the paper, wind attribute will cut the paper, and lightning attribute will cause it to wrinkle. The problem is certainly not that the chakra test paper in Zenayu's hand has changed too much to be distinguishable. If that were the case, given Zenayu's personality, he might even be proud of it. The problem now is, the paper has not changed at all. Faced with multiple ups and downs in a single day, Zenayu's young figure cast a long shadow in the setting sun. Looking back, he could only wipe the heat from his face and stare into the endless distance. I have no regrets in my life. Chapter 6. The Song of Time flows into the sea. Step. A series of quick footsteps echoed as the black-haired youth climbed toward the treetop, almost perpendicular to the trunk. He suddenly hunched his waist, and in a moment, his rapid upward movement came to a halt. He twisted his body, flicking his wrist gently. Almost instantly, 3 dark shadows shot out with a flick of his wrist, dashing further away. The 3 kunai, piercing the wind, firmly struck the red bullseye. A swift, precise, and graceful performance. The children gathered around cheered, as if welcoming their hero. He turned and landed. The black-haired child approached slowly with a cold and arrogant expression. A magatama petal slowly twirled into his crimson eyes. Tisk, he spat with disdain. 2 years hadn't smoothed out the edges of these brats. Aside from 1 or 2 perverts, the others were still children in mind and spirit. When praised, he either blushes shyly or looks up to show off. When criticized, he either bows his head in tears or tilts it, a dead pig fearless of boiling water. Well, if there's anyone who stands out, it's this Uchiha kid named Tsurugi. It's said he was originally a side branch, but because he opened the Sharingan early on, he was favored by the family. Lately, he's commanding authority even among these kids, though he's a bit quiet. But the combination of snow-white skin plus cool and handsome appearance plus strong and reliable strength is indeed very powerful among young girls. What are you looking at? Of course, the passage of time is not meaningless. Since learning that he has no innate chakra talent for any type of chakra, Shinryu has calmed down. After all, surviving in this world of powerful individuals is a difficult task. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be self-reliant, but if it's truly a piece of wood, no matter how much you carve it, it's likely to be instantly destroyed. In this case, the despised act of clinging to someone's influence is more reliable. However, turning his head to look at the round face of the monkey on him, Zenayuan questioned the other person's golden nickname for the first time. Could it be that my cooking skills have improved again in the past 2 years? Nothing, just a bunch of little brats. Zenayuan jokingly slapped away the other person's hand that was hooked on his shoulder and shook his head in disdain. 3 years had passed since they started school, and most of the children had formed their own cliques within the class. Minato and Shinryu, a pair of close friends, were constantly praised by their teachers. The reason for this was that Shinryu firmly held the top spot on the class in terms of theoretical performance, while Minato, who had previously been mediocre, had made significant progress with the help of his best friend. Conversely, Minato possessed a certain innate talent in practical combat. This was something even Shinryu, a layman, could see. Let's take a simple example. Generally speaking, when someone throws a punch, most people's first reaction is to retreat, as this gives them more time to react and a wider field of vision to gather intelligence. However, Minato, who had never received professional training, went the other way. His close-quarters combat style was truly terrifying. Of course, with the help of such a genius, Shin'Young's previously mediocre practical classes remained mediocre. Well, the flaws don't outweigh the merits. Come on. Today's practice is kunai throwing. I really don't know what all this pointless movement is for. Shrugging his shoulders, Shin'Yu began his warm-up. After stretching his waist slightly, Shin'Yu pulled a kunai from the ninja tool pouch at his waist. His eyes narrowed, and he began a lengthy aiming motion. Duo, unlike Uchiha Eagle's 3-arrow volley, Senju Shin'Yu's throw was merely average. In terms of speed, power, and accuracy, it was significantly inferior to Eagle's earlier one. But Shin'Yu didn't seem to care. He leisurely pulled another kunai from his pocket and fired it at the target in the same manner. Duo, the same sound, even the kunai's trajectory was roughly the same. Compared to Shin'Yu's somewhat boring practice, the young genius Minato Namikaze was a completely different scene. He launched his kunai at the target without hesitation. While not every kunai hit the bullseye, his unique method of applying force made it at least twice as fast as an average person. Buzz, 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 the sound of breaking wind continued. After about 20 seconds, Minato finally completed his first round of throws. He then personally retrieved each kunai he had fired. Just when everyone thought he would continue this practice, he did something unexpected. He raised his hand, and as his palm slowly dropped, the kunai he had just placed aside began to disappear almost instantly. In almost an instant, Minato had thrown in nearly 6 kunai. However, this seemed to reduce his chances of hitting the target again, with many even landing near the target. Hey, unlike the others, Shin'Yu chose to watch. Instead, he quietly continued his practice. Ever since he'd told the boy the saying, "No martial art is invincible except speed," he seemed to be truly getting closer and closer to the yondaime he imagined. An afternoon of training quickly concluded, and most of the children dispersed in a clamorous frenzy. Minato remained alone, accompanying Shin'Yu as he collected the 3 kunai he had been using. Then, playing and joking, the 2 children made their way to Shin'Yu's mansion. Minato's parents had both died on the battlefield, so as their relationship grew, Shin'Yu simply took Minato in to live with him. After all, he was just a child, and even with Konoha's support, living alone would be too difficult. Fortunately, the Senju clan didn't share the Uchiha clan's strong xenophobia, perhaps partly because there weren't any issues with exposed blood. But at least Shin'Yu's parents approved of his decision, and as a result, Minato Namikaze truly became their second child. Dinner was plentiful, and the ninja school didn't assign much homework. With Shin'Yu, the humanoid answer machine, completing homework was a breeze for the future yondaime. When it was completely dark, after exercising in the yard for a while, Shin'Yu and Minato took a nice hot bath and went to rest. Well, although I really want to say this, in fact, Shin'Yu's training has just begun. The night is still long. Chapter 7, Predicting the Future. Possessing no chakra attributes, the eccentric Shin'Yu was fortunately born into the Senju clan. This is because there actually exists a remarkable technique in this world that requires no chakra of any kind to activate. The chakra scalpel. Besides the well-known wood release technique, the Senju clan possesses another equally renowned skill, medical ninjutsu. Practicing medical ninjutsu undoubtedly increases one's chances of teaming up with Minato. But most importantly, this technique requires no special chakra type, allowing even beginners to perform it with ease. While it might not be able to heal a patient right away, the sharpness of the scalpel is undeniable. However, this seemingly impressive ninjutsu comes with 2 rather demanding requirements. First, the chakra scalpel is a jutsu that consumes an incredible amount of chakra. It materializes chakra and creates spiral cuts on the hand. This is the secret of the jutsu. But for Jinan, maintaining the scalpel for even 2 minutes, not counting other costs, is incredibly difficult. Second, the chakra scalpel requires incredibly precise chakra control. Otherwise, even if one can withstand the immense chakra consumption, their hand will likely be completely bruised before they even succeed in killing the enemy. But for Shin'Yu, both of these qualities are perfectly suited. Regarding chakra, even if Shin'Yu is just over 9 years old, judging by the quantity alone, even if he's a chunin, it wouldn't be surprising to call him a chunin. As for control, According to his father's description and the relevant records in the family books, when a ninja reaches the rank of Kage, their chakra control and recovery reach a completely different level. And below the rank of Kage, Shinai is confident that no one can surpass him in chakra control. Why is Shinai's chakra cultivation so incredibly fast? Why is he so confident in his chakra control? Despite some speculation, even now, Shinai couldn't be sure his answer was accurate. Every time he cultivated chakra, he'd have a peculiar feeling, as if the blue energy coursing through his meridians could predict its direction. He could tell where it would stagnate, how it would flow more smoothly, the fluctuations in chakra concentration, even that tiny, almost negligible inertia. While the Uzumaki clan's constitution and the Senju family's superior bloodline must have gifted him with a truly gifted body, it was probably this ability, akin to foresight, that truly propelled him onto the path of a demon. This made chakra control much simpler. On multiple-choice questions where he could predict the outcome, Shinai could certainly always answer with absolute accuracy. But unfortunately, this so-called precognition was merely a fleeting feeling. To put it more clearly, the duration of this precognition was so brief that it wasn't enough for Shinai to perceive any concrete image. At most, it was just his body instinctively responding to danger and avoiding danger. It's like watching an ACG game. Whether it's full screen or high definition, you know the content is the same, but it's difficult to discern the author's work, especially with the former. Well, besides the time span of the effect, the target, depending on the current situation, would have a certain effect on objects or people other than himself. It was precisely because of this guarantee that, during daytime kunai throwing practice, Shinai would resort to such a shabby method. Before each kunai was launched, he would actually use his chakra to carve a nearly invisible spiral pattern into the surface of the handle. Over time, the entire handle was covered in a certain pattern of spiral patterns. Compared to this complicated process, throwing the kunai was just entertainment. He used the time in class or in practical combat courses to train his ability to control this so-called precognition, and when he slept at night, Shinai actually had a training project hidden that he couldn't tell anyone. The lights had long been turned off. In the darkness, Shinai stared around with his big, round eyes and observed the enemy situation for a while. After making sure that no one knew, he put on a strange expression like an uncle meeting a little lolly, a hente meeting at Sundeer, and then buried his head in the quilt and slowly moved to a place near the corridor, where there was a faint, seductive moonlight. Then the boy's quilt kept shaking, sometimes with a few pleasant and obscene laughs from time to time. Ahem, of course it's not some censored book. In fact, this is a rare copy that Shinai secretly brought out from the family library. It is said that the first Hokage, Senju Hashirama, was proficient in wood-release ninjutsu, so he had an extraordinary self-healing ability compared to ordinary ninjas. Therefore, the medical ninjutsu of the Senju clan has also developed quite prosperously. In order to master this ninjutsu that consumes a lot of spirit and willpower, the Senju clan summarized the experience of their predecessors and have their own set of methods for training mental strength. That's right, the rare copy that Shinai just got is recording this method. Partly, this was to improve his medical ninjutsu skills, but more importantly, Shinai questioned the source of his ability to foresee the future. Just like Minato, known as the Golden Flash in the future, a completely untalented individual could never master the Flying Thunder God, a weapon so powerful it could slay even the most powerful. Without a doubt, Minato possessed an innate talent for space-based ninjutsu. And what about Shinai? What kind of gift was this supposed foresight? So far in his time traveling, Shinai hadn't had the good fortune of his predecessors, receiving some sort of golden finger from the god of fate. So, he wondered if this ability was related to time. It seemed his last act before traveling through time was to complain about how crappy old man Time's gay ultimate move was. What if? Shinai was just saying what if his guess is correct, this ability to predict the future can be explained. Compared to the special ability of the fourth generation Minato, isn't time also perverted enough? From a long time ago, this chicken-moving guess has been lingering in Shinai's mind. Until some time ago, he accidentally learned about the existence of this book and finally made up his mind to give it a try. Tonight is the best opportunity. Although there is no conclusion yet, Shinai has actually begun to worry. What nickname should I call him in the future? Hey, the obscene laughter in the quilt became more obscene. Minato, who was already asleep, turned over and subconsciously wrapped the quilt tightly. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8, Don't Run If You Dare. The night passed quickly, leaving Konoha, bathed in morning dew, clean and bright. 2 years of ninja school life had at least taught the lazy modern Shinayu a ninja's routine. And after the night, a special gleam appeared in Shinayu's eyes. Perhaps it was a benefit of his initial training, but his mental strength had skyrocketed. Well, in terms of total strength, it was only about a 1%, but for something so untouchable, it was a considerable increase. The immediate benefit of this growth was that Shinayu's premonition had shifted slightly faster. Yes, it was still very subtle, and could only be confirmed through personal experience, but one thing was certain, Shinayu had improved. Wow, at this rate, it wouldn't be long before he'd dominate the ninja world, defeat the rich and handsome, marry the beautiful and wealthy, and reach the pinnacle of life. Thinking about it, it was really, oh my. Shinayu slapped himself hard and continued washing his face. Waking up early is a surefire way to daydream. Those big bosses in the later stories are no match for my tiny body. I'll be dead along with a cannon fodder in no time. You have more chakra, but more than the tailed beasts? But even the tailed beasts are being captured like Pokemon. Have you ever seen a meteorite the size of an island? They appear out of thin air, 2 at a time. Patting his cheeks vigorously and wiping away the water, Shinayu was just like usual, no, even lazier than usual. He practically yawned through breakfast amidst his mother's scolding, then was dragged unsteadily to the classroom by Minato. From which novel did everyone start to believe that cultivating spiritual power meant you didn't need sleep? That was true for mages, that was true for ninjas. Until today, Shinayu could finally tell everyone that this was absolutely a rip-off. Yesterday, he finally fell asleep only after daybreak in the east. How could he not be sleepy in such a state? The result was obvious. Shinayu had simply used the morning theory class to catch up on sleep. Since he was usually the top student in the arts, the teacher, though somewhat displeased, hadn't made him stand outside as punishment. How could sleeping standing up be as comfortable as sitting? Of course, it would have been nice to be able to lie down, ahem, just saying, don't take it seriously. In the afternoon, even though he hadn't fully caught up on his sleep, Shinayu had to force himself to attend the class despite his fatigue. The afternoon was the practical class. The 3 basic ninjutsu, clone jutsu, substitution jutsu, and transformation jutsu, had been taught to these young students a year ago. But compared to the more direct techniques of kunai throwing, close combat, and even the more lethal jutsu that some geniuses had already mastered, these 3 basic ninjutsu were quite unpopular. But in reality, the value of these 3 ninjutsu in actual combat is truly immeasurable. Knowing that young children often underestimate the importance of learning these 3 ninjutsu, the teachers at the ninja school arrange monthly assessments on the 3 body techniques. This time, the teacher even mentioned that they would invite a prominent figure to explain them. Initially, these were simple trial assessments, but now, they have gradually evolved into practical applications. The theoretical lessons have already covered numerous examples of the 3 body techniques, and in practical classes, students will pair up for sparring, and the use of ninja tools or other ninjutsu is not permitted. Well, normally, at times like this, Shinayu would happily seek out Minato and attempt a duel with a ninja, known for his speed. Admittedly, Minato, only a few months his senior, was a true genius. Even at full strength, he'd hardly be able to defeat him in hand-to-hand combat. Furthermore, since both of them employed a one-hit kill strategy, the duration of their standoffs was extremely brief, making it seem as if Shinayu was constantly being killed. Note that full strength here even includes foreseeing the future. Shinayu had mentioned this ability to Minato, and while surprised, he admitted that he sometimes experienced similar effects. It was like he intuitively knew where the opponent's attack would originate. He didn't even need to see it. Truly worthy of being the legendary youngest and strongest Hokage. Minato, with his spatial jutsu, was a complete flaw. It wasn't obvious in this kind of fight yet, but as his close combat jutsu system matured, Minato would become Konoha's most formidable weapon on the battlefield. After all, facing such agile ninjas, Minato, mastering the Flying Thunder God technique, would have a killing efficiency comparable to that of the tailed beasts. No, all that talk has completely missed the point. In reality, it was precisely because Minato Namikaze was so powerful that Shinayu, in his weak form today, clearly had no intention of seeking a fight. He stealthily moved, hoping to find a scapegoat as quickly as possible before his teacher dismissed the group. Well, his luck wasn't great. As Shinayu cautiously edged away from Minato, another figure in his line of sight clearly had a completely different plan. Uchiha. This fellow, considered a prodigy alongside Minato, headed almost directly towards the future Yondaime. Though he hated to admit it, Uchiha, having just opened his Sharingan, knew he was no match for Minato Namikaze. Even in his immature observation, this commoner was undoubtedly a formidable foe. He was too fast. In every sparring match, he subdued his opponent almost without them even reacting. Before the special training, even with his Sharingan activated, Eagle hadn't felt confident of defeating him. But this time was different. Having just received training from the clan elders, Eagle was completely confident he could defeat his longtime rival Hidan. Everyone made way for him, except for Shinayu, who was completely oblivious to what was happening behind him. It was a horrific tragedy. The two, completely unprepared, moving in opposite directions, finally collided fiercely. A dull thud echoed from shoulder blade to sternum. Shinayu could only apologize profusely for his shoulder-shoving action, which he knew must have hurt. Sorry, the collision naturally attracted the attention of the surrounding students, and Shinayu could only scratch the back of his head, apologetically extending his right hand to the other party. You're not hurt. Shit, Shinayu, the one who had just been the culprit, immediately leaped away like a raging wreck. He couldn't help but grab. The other party had already unleashed a kunai. If he hadn't jumped out of the way, relying on his ability to predict the future, he'd have been stabbed to death by now. What's wrong with you? Even if I was wrong for hitting him, you didn't have to show your weapon. We're all in the same class. Can't you give me a chance to live? With a sullen face, Eagle didn't waste any more words. He instantly opened his Magatama Sharingan and lunged at him, still perched on the tree fork. The kunai, faintly gleaming with a cold light, held its owner's boundless wrath. Death! Bang! Smoke billowed, and as he shielded his head with his hands, he was stabbed through and disappeared instantly, leaving only a broken piece of wood pierced by the kunai. A body substitution jutsu? I knew it all along. The Sharingan, one of Konoha's most powerful bloodline limits, finally revealed its true power. With just a Magatama opening, Eagle could now easily see through the opponent's chakra flow. In other words, ninjutsu-like body substitution jutsu was completely meaningless to him. Without stopping, he lightly stepped on the branch with his toes, and the whole person turned into a black shadow, flying towards the higher branch on the other side. Don't run if you dare. The one squatting there was Shinayu, who had just escaped. Tisk, the Sharingan and other things are troublesome. Chapter 9, actually, you don't have to graduate. Don't run if you dare. An enraged Uchiha is terrifying, because you never know if he can open his Sharingan. This is especially true of the imp charging towards the higher branches. Those crimson eyes are the very symbol of Konoha's pride. It's safe to say that an Uchiha with his Sharingan activated experiences a whole new level of power boost. Indeed, judging solely by his normal combat prowess, Uchiha is barely a Jonin. But once he opens his Sharingan, even with just one Magatama, the boosts in insight, dynamic vision, and overall speed are significant. Now, Uchiha is capable of defeating ordinary Jonin head-on. He could even rival some geniuses. Just like the substitution jutsu just now. Shinayu's timing was incredibly precise, but since the opponent could see through all the chakra flows, it was easily seen through. So, it's basically cheating, right? Well, enough of my boring complaints. For Shinayu, after being reborn into this world, a feeling of unease pervaded him. To him, the ninja world seemed too illusory, too unreal, so ingrained in him a fear of the unknown. To put it more bluntly, Shinayu was deeply afraid of death. Any threat to his very existence was an unbearable provocation. Therefore, from the moment the opponent drew his real kunai, the nature of this enjoyable fight changed. He wasn't about to let it go. Standing higher up, Shinayu calmly watched his opponent's every move. The rapidly ascending opponent would soon reach his current position. So, his chosen attack would be a straight kunai thrust. That's right, future vision activated. Shinayu had received this information before the kunai struck him, albeit only a fraction of a second. Puff, the kunai pierced Shinayu's body. The timid child even covered his eyes, while the approaching teacher was equally stunned. A fatal blow. No, It wasn't. Only Eagle, having delivered the blow himself, realized he hadn't hit his target at all. The one he had stabbed was undoubtedly a double. How could this be possible? It should have been a physical entity until the moment before the attack. How did this happen? He didn't believe anyone could deceive the Sharingan. And in fact, Tai was right. Shinryu hadn't deceived the Sharingan, he had only deceived his opponent. Bang! Smoke dissipated, and Shinryu, who had just been attacked, quickly turned into a rotten piece of wood. Not far behind Eagle, the boy's form gradually emerged, Senju Shinryu. Impossible? Without a single declaration of victory, Shinryu decisively kicked Eagle's calf, countering his opponent's movement. Then, with his hands clenched into fists, he delivered a powerful blow from top to bottom, piercing the opponent's waist. Bang! This time, there was a much duller sound, coupled with a powerful knee strike that instantly rendered the Uchiha brat unconscious. Fortunately, the late-coming teacher was quick-witted, or else Uchiha Eagle would have fallen from the spot. Tisk! Shinryu spat in disdain. Such a half-hearted person had the audacity to attack so rashly. How could he, knowing the Sharingan's power, resort to such a pointless evasive method right from the start? All of this was merely a way to play along with the opponent's thinking. And then, thinking he had absolute control, Wacky had no idea that his fierce attack had been completely anticipated. Using his foresight, he finally unleashed a second substitution jutsu in the nick of time. While the Sharingan could see through chakra flows, it was completely meaningless if the user couldn't detect it quickly enough. Indeed, Wacky's failure had nothing to do with the Sharingan, it was simply that he, as a user, was far from qualified. Turning around and nodding to Minato, who waved at him from beneath the tree, Shinryu finally relaxed from his previous confrontation. He yawned wearily and leisurely descended from the treetops. Climbing trees was no problem for Shinryu. Well, perhaps this was the only way he could surpass Minato? Thinking about it, the idea of genius really was a bit of a rip-off. Minato smiled and waved to his best friend. From the beginning, he hadn't intended to support Shinryu, because no one knew Shinryu's strength better than he did. He was bound to win. However, this scene completely surprised the spectators. After all, that was Uchiha, a genius among geniuses. From the moment the duel began, everyone assumed Shinryu would be the one to be beaten to pulp. No matter how you looked at it, there was no way this guy could defeat the Uchiha with a Sharingan. But the facts were indisputable. With just 2 substitution techniques, a common person had won the duel. This scene instantly overturned the children's perceptions, but in a different way, it also stirred the passion of this generation of youngsters. Geniuses aren't invincible. While they possess advantages beyond the reach of ordinary people, with enough effort, ordinary people can also defeat the geniuses of powerful families. Well, while Shinryu is certainly not ordinary, speaking of powerful families, is it really a big deal to defeat an Uchiha kid like that? Having calmed down, Shinryu actually began to worry. While it was certainly wrong for the other party to make a fuss and attack first, he had insulted them in front of so many people. Given the nature of the Uchiha clan, they probably wouldn't let it go easily. That's brilliant. Just as Shinryu was brooding, a strange round of applause echoed from the walls of the ninja school. It was a man with white hair. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't that old, in fact, quite the opposite. His features looked quite young, yet he wore the vest that symbolized Konoha's Jonin. In reality, becoming a Jonin required more than just strength, it also required a significant accumulation of missions and military exploits. To reach the rank of Jonin at this age meant he was undoubtedly a genius. Black-haired brat, he propped his chin up, gazing at the stunned Shinryu with a playful expression. Would you like to graduate early and become my apprentice? Jiraiya, the Sandame's direct disciple and Konoha's Jonin, offered a hand of friendship to child. For most people, this was a perfect opportunity to ascend to the top. Shinryu, who had been stunned, suddenly snapped back to his senses as if struck by something, and then uttered something that made everyone's jaws drop. Well, Renjia actually doesn't want to graduate yet, what? This brat actually rejected Master Jiraiya? Oh my god. Do you think you'll find a more reliable, more powerful, and more well-connected teacher after you graduate? Don't be ridiculous. But then, Jiraiya, who was almost thrown off the wall, trembled and said something even more unexpected. Well, it's okay. In fact, you can become my disciple even before you graduate. Chapter 10, You Must Be Attracted by Her Beauty. Jiraiya once wondered if 22 was too early to accept a disciple. As the Sandame's most favored disciple, countless descendants from prominent families in Konoha village sought his services. However, the white-haired sage felt that accepting a disciple at such a young age was a waste of his youth. This sentiment had finally changed until today. Originally, he had merely been entrusted by the Sandame to teach the children a lesson in substitution techniques, but upon arriving, Jiraiya witnessed a battle that even he could not help but applaud. That black-haired brat possessed the decisiveness and judgment necessary for a ninja, and more than that, he possessed formidable combat instincts. Had he activated the substitution technique just a moment earlier, the Sharingan would have easily seen through him, just like last time. A moment later, and the Kyuubi would have struck him. Engaging in breathtaking close combat, he managed to calmly devise a winning strategy. This child, untainted by blood or any special talent, was so much like himself back then. Sometimes, admiration is as simple as that, without any particular reason, simply a shifting emotion. Well, no, it doesn't matter. Actually, you can become my apprentice even if you don't graduate. The so-called apprenticeship ended in such a hurry. After asking for Shinayong's personal information, Jiraiya said that he would go to his house and wait for him to come back in the evening. That wrinkled smile like an old chrysanthemum made little Shinayong shudder. Oh my god, this old guy must be attracted by my looks. Shinayong subconsciously turned around and looked at Minato, who was still a little boy. He looked very handsome. The lecherous immortal standard for accepting disciples would not be based on appearance. Although it is a bit rude to think so, it is undeniable that if this is true, Shinayong can be said to have mixed feelings. Although being targeted by such an old pervert is not a good thing, but at least it proves that he is still a handsome guy, isn't it? See, it's not just women who focus on their appearance to this degree. Jiraiya's appearance drew most of the attention, and becoming his disciple wasn't such a bad idea. At least it was much better than Orochimaru's. Shinryu had only rejected Jiraiya earlier because he had the impression that war was about to break out. With my small frame, if I were to go to a real battlefield, wouldn't I be dead in a matter of minutes? I'm such a fool. Sitting back in school is so comfortable. Well, since they've relaxed the conditions to the point where I don't even have to graduate, I can't complain. Besides, being Jiraiya's disciple naturally carries the stamp of the Hokage lineage, so those old Uchiha guys might have to think twice before attacking me. Overall, the pros outweigh the cons. Thinking it through, Shinryu silently rubbed the back of his head, gave an innocent smile, and quickly immersed himself in his sparring with Minato. Unfortunately, he was still young and knew nothing. The scene that just happened in the ninja school would be the beginning of his misfortune in this life, unlike the teachers in the ninja school, in the ninja world. After graduating from the school, the students will follow a leading teacher to form a combat team to continue their studies. The bond between the master and the apprentice is sometimes even stronger than that of the family. In terms of ninjutsu, the experience of training, and even the understanding of life, it can be said that the person who has the greatest influence on a ninja is his teacher. Therefore, the matter of becoming a disciple is very important in the eyes of the ninja. Whether or not one can meet a great teacher determines the future achievements and the path that the ninja will take to a large extent. When Jiraiya arrived at the Senju clan's residence, Nanmu and Mizuho were actually very surprised. After all, compared to the hero Senju of Mori, who was at the end of his life, this man was a well-known figure in Konoha village. Actually it's nothing. The main purpose of my visit today is for your son. You mean Shinryu? Yes, that's right. Lord Jiraiya touched the back of his head habitually. In fact, I have accepted him as my apprentice today, but he is still in the ninja school, so I thought I would say hello to Shinryu's parents first. Is that so? Mizuho, who was standing aside, covered her mouth in surprise. Although he and Nanmu were both masters of the Jonin level, compared with the young man in front of them, they definitely did not have the strength to fight. It has been rumored for a long time that the three disciples of Lord Hokage are actually very close to the cage level. Seeing him today, it turned out to be true. Please come in. Sorry to bother you. That night, Jiraiya had a very pleasant family dinner with the two boys at the Senju mansion. Of course, while drinking, the lustful sage seemed to have discovered another piece of jade, the kid with golden hair, who seemed to be called Namikaze Minato. His actual combat power and potential are hard to say, but his clear, resolute eyes and sunny personality are very much what Jiraiya would like. I mean, his taste for a disciple. I'm really full. In the courtyard after dinner, Jiraiya and the two kids chatted leisurely. Compared to the still somewhat restrained Minato, Shinayong seemed much calmer. Speaking of which, Master, Shinayong scratched his heart boredly. Let me tell you in advance, I can't compare to Minato's innate proficiency in water and earth, but Shinayong's face even had a hint of playfulness. He had rashly accepted him as a disciple without any investigation, and now that he knew the truth. Hey, let this old guy regret it since he agreed to it. It's like a dogskin plaster, and he can't get rid of it in this lifetime. Having said that, according to the strategy of clinging to someone's thigh, this time he has clung to another thigh that is really strong. I don't even have a single attribute, really, the white-haired man said, gazing calmly at the sky. The smile in his eyes never faded, only grew gentler. That expression was one Shinayong would never forget. As a child, he could only gaze up at that profile, but that casual, yet incredibly rare smile would be forever etched in his heart. That's truly interesting, my disciple. He felt a strange sensation, as if, after 9 years in this world, he had finally come alive, for the first time. Chapter 11, Team Leader. The following year brought a more fulfilling life. After all, as Jiraiya's disciples, besides attending regular classes, both Shinayu and Minato received instruction from their teacher. The older Minato had made significant progress, now even training in wind attribute chakra. Even with equal chakra levels, Minato's sharpness was enough to defeat opponents. It was undeniable that Minato was truly a genius. He had even begun experimenting with harnessing the power of the wind to speed up his movements. While the results weren't yet apparent, that was clearly because Minato's chakra control wasn't up to par yet. He seemed to have an innate talent for wind attribute chakra, or perhaps he was simply favored by it. Even Jiraiya was surprised that the brat had noticed how to alter wind pressure during battle to confuse opponents and allow for sneak attacks. In contrast, Shinayu's progress seemed less pronounced. Because he lacked a natural chakra attribute, his potential for ninjutsu training was limited. Rather than compromise and practice ninjutsu for which he lacked a natural talent, he preferred to continue honing his chakra scalpel. But Jiraiya's title of master teacher wasn't just a title. In the future, the Yondaime Hokage, Uzumaki Nagato, Konoha, and Yahiko would all become renowned figures, a testament to Jiraiya's mentoring abilities. His words hit home for Shinayu. Without future predictions, how much fighting power would you have left? True, Shinayu was only ordinary. Compared to a genius like Minato, he'd only been able to temporarily reach the same level of skill thanks to his natural talent, but was that the end of it? No. For the first time, Shinayu felt a sense of unwillingness to admit defeat. He began to rely on his own strength. He began to believe in himself. And so, starting a year ago, the skills he once mastered with ease, like climbing trees and treading water, were once again on his to-do list. Senju Shinayu began to try to overcome these difficulties with his own strength. And the results were surprisingly good. Shinayu seemed to have a natural talent for chakra control. Over the past year, his chakra control had reached perfection. Of course, this was only relative to his peers. Without cheating tricks like foreknowledge, he could never compare to masters like Jiraiya, but on the other hand, in actual combat, Shinayu's chakra control was fully comparable to Jiraiya, who was already an elite Jonin and had one foot in the rank of Kage. And this was based on Shinayu's immense chakra reserves. Over the past year, as his body gradually matured, Shinayu's chakra began to grow exponentially. His daily practice brought him visible progress, just like his height. Now, if we only counted chakra, he was on par with the rookie who had just entered the Jonin ranks. Of course, for Shinayong himself, the most important thing is the cultivation of mental power. Although it is indeed very tiring to do this every day, after practicing for a period of time, he found that the Senshao family's method of cultivating mental power is actually very similar to the Buddhist walking meditation. That is to say, no matter what Shinayong does during the day, it will not affect this kind of cultivation. In the past 6 months, Shinayong has even become accustomed to this kind of practice anytime and anywhere, so over such a long time, Shinayong's time and accuracy in predicting the future have been greatly improved. Well, it seems that a month ago, the time for predicting the future has been fixed at about 0.5 seconds, but this did not stop Shinayong's cultivation of mental power. He has vaguely felt that the wall is very close to him. As long as he pushes it open, there will definitely be unexpected surprises. Yes. The only bad news for Shinayu, who cherished his life dearly, these days is that war seems imminent. 3 days ago, Jiraiya left in a hurry after handing over the future training arrangements to Shinayu and Minato. It seems the Sandaime had assigned him some secret mission. And this group of ninja students, only in their 4th year, graduated early after a period of training. The dark clouds of war have unnoticeably descended upon Konoha. It's foreseeable that if war breaks out, Konoha village will be the primary target. Shinayu adjusted the forward protector strap to his right arm. He felt that wearing it in front of his head was too much of a hindrance to his vision and comfort. Ahem, okay, it's actually because his fringe doesn't really match the forward protector. If his hair was a little sun-blonde, Shinayu might have just kept it pressed against his forehead. With all the students from 4th to 6th grades already graduated, assigning teachers was undoubtedly the biggest problem. While Konoha tradition typically dictated that newly graduated students be grouped into 4-person teams under the leadership of a Jonin, precious Jonin resources were simply unavailable at this time. Incidentally, Shinayu's father had been drafted a few days earlier, leaving his mother, Mizuho, retired and able to focus on the family. While Minato and Shinayu were already considered geniuses, without the support of a large family, they were bound to be at a disadvantage. And yet, as luck would have it, they were assigned to the same team as Uchiha. Oh my god. Shinayu was speechless at this arrangement. The war hadn't even begun, and the impending first engagement would undoubtedly be the most brutal. And yet, the Uchiha clan was willing to send their own young prodigy out on a mission? Hadn't they seen how the Yamanaka and Nara clans had their young talents well hidden? The bigwigs knew this wasn't the right time for fresh blood to enter the fray. Only when the war entered its attrition phase would these young prodigies truly shine. Thanks to Uchiha, the organization overcame all odds and assigned them a Jonin mentor. Well, now he should be called a captain. But even if he racked his brains, Shinayu couldn't believe his luck had reached such an incredible level. Their Jonin captain was a quiet young man, but his dazzling white hair still betrayed a murderous aura. "I'm your captain." His tone was even a little cold, but Shinayu's heart leaped with joy as if he had won $1 million. "My name is Hatake Tsukumo." The brief self-introduction ended. The other two might not have heard of this guy, but how could Shinayu not know such a well-known figure? "Thank you, Six Paths Sage. You've finally opened your eyes. You've given me such a safe bodyguard." Hatake Tsukumo. Konoha White Fang. Seeing someone who can just abandon the mission. Damn, let's see who dares to mess with me when the war starts. Chapter 12, Saving Private Kushina. Of course, while he'd been venting his arrogance inwardly, and knowing full well that he'd already made plans to bully the men and women and exploit the people in his community, plans to bravely kill the enemy and achieve great feats on the battlefield, given Jinyoung's personality, he'd have wanted war to come soon. Life was tough now, requiring him to train from dawn to dusk, but it wasn't life-threatening after all. As the saying goes, swords and guns are blind, fire and water are merciless, and ninja battles possess all of these qualities. So, for Jinyoung, on the eve of war, the longer the calm before the storm lasted, the better. Well, while people generally say that death isn't the most terrifying thing, but the waiting for it, that wasn't true for Jinyoung at all. In reality, he was a true hedonist, pursuing the ultimate in survival and pleasure. So even when faced with a desperate situation, he would still consider how to survive. The days leading up to the war might have been a bit difficult for other rookies, but for this guy, eating when it was time to eat, sleeping when it was time to sleep, and preparing the capital to survive was the real thing. What's the point of being entangled here? You guys can die, I still have to live well. But what's the old saying? The busier you are, the more trouble you will encounter. Logically, at this time, the entire Konoha village should have been united, but which war wasn't suddenly started by the small actions of a certain ninja village? Konoha was no exception. When no one noticed, danger quietly descended upon Konoha, and as luck would have it, it descended upon Shinyoung, the dividing line where the accident began. As they grew older and their strength increased, Shinyoung and Minato no longer shared a room. They no longer shared a room. After all, they were at an age where they should have some private environment. After all, Minato might want to collect some things like Kushina's photos, and Kushina's photos. For this, Shinyoung also lost a good gay. His friends were heartbroken for a long time, and also warned Minato that masturbating while looking at girls' photos at night was a behavior. Well, I'll take this for now. Fortunately, the Senjo residence was perfectly adequate, so housing wasn't a concern. However, As the two young men's strength grew, more problems began to arise. The small courtyard, once large enough for the two of them to play, was completely obsolete with the beginning of Minato's Chak's attribute transformation training. With no other options, Shinayu and Minato had to move their training to the forest near the edge of Konoha village. As Jiraiya's disciples, obtaining a permit to operate outside the village was a simple task. Once outside the village, the vast expanse was more than enough for the two brothers to enjoy. But just as Minato was moving through the trees like a clever monkey as usual, a strand of red hair suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. It was obviously the remnant of the owner's chakra stage, and its owner had more elegant and long red hair. Minato silently held the red hair in his hand. Without saying a word, he silently organized the equipment that was still in training into combat state, and then checked the items in the ninja tool bag. "Let's go." A small hand patted his back. If it were usual, Minato would have had a premonition beforehand, but this moment, he was obviously surprised. Turning around, what appeared in front of him was that familiar smiling face. "Based on your current state, you must have been delivering food to others in the past." Xianyang waved his hand at Xiao Yang with disdain. "No matter as a younger brother or a classmate, I can't just watch you die like this." Minato's eyes instantly became red. He knew that he should go back to the village with Xianyang and tell the ninja in charge of searching for the enemy, but if he did that, Kushina might never come back. If she was taken out of the border, even Konoha would be unable to pursue her, so he resolutely chose to take the risk. "Thank you." "Oh my, are you going to cry again?" Xianyang interrupted him, jumped onto the tree branch, and deliberately made a look of disgust. "How disgusting, so disgusting." He silently rushed forward, a smile finally curling up at the corners of his mouth. Such a risky move absolutely contradicted Shinayu's original intention. If it were anyone else, he would have chosen to stand aside without hesitation. But not this time. The kidnapped girl was Kushina, and his best friend had decided to take the risk of certain death for her. A passion, long absent from Shinayu's heart, began to boil. Though he silently cursed the trouble, despite his own foolishness, and consoled himself with the thought that it was a sacrifice made to cling to his patron saint, the smile on his lips cast all pretense aside. Senju Shinayu, this was the first time he had risked his life for someone else, and even the fearful Shinayu felt an uncontrollable pleasure. Minato quickly wiped away his tears. In that moment, his eyes were filled with determination, and in a trance, he seemed to resonate with a majestic yongame in Shinayu's memory. "Kushina, I will definitely rescue you." So, the pursuit battle between the two brats began. Minato's face was full of determination, and beside him, the black-haired figure had been standing there since a long time ago. They didn't know that from now on, they would carry out many more missions together, and would experience many more dangers, and even desperate situations, but one day in the future, when they bumped their fists together on the battlefield and joined hands to kill the enemy, the whole ninja world would be shocked by these two brats. That's right, the legend has begun to be written quietly, about that boy who was like the sun, about that boy who always had a playful expression on his face, about this era, the next era, about two giants that were enough to make the whole ninja world tremble. Chapter 13, Shouting Founded is Meaningless. It's confirmed that the red hair is Kushina's clue. It's remarkable that my future sister-in-law would leave a sign of self-help under such circumstances. Should I say she's truly my mother's clan? No one in the Uzumaki clan will die easily. Not only do they possess vitality and chakra reserves unmatched by ordinary humans, every one of them is determined to fight to the death. Wait a moment, we will come to rescue you soon. With a slight smile on his lips, Xianyang knew that what he did had violated the code of conduct as a ninja. Although in the original work, Minato successfully rescued Kushina alone, no matter how you think about it, being able to safely pass through Konoha's defense circle and even take a living person away from Konoha village, this method and ability really does not seem like the work of a chunin. Xianyang has even made preparations to fight against the Jonin. Now he and Minato can probably reach the level of chunin. In comparison, ordinary chunin probably won't be Minato's opponent, but if it is a Jonin. Tisk, Xianyang laughed secretly. He had already decided to give chase. It was meaningless to think about these things now. All he had to think about now was how to defeat his enemy. Almost subconsciously, he looked at Minato, who was also moving at high speed beside him. He looked ahead firmly and even a little stiffly, constantly searching for the hair left by Kushina, and in his hand, the bunch of red hair was particularly conspicuous. Really, he has set his eyes on his future wife at such a young age. Hey, Minato, Judging from the traces they left behind, they were still some distance away from the enemy. Shinayu didn't look in Minato's direction, but continued to speak. "What's wrong, Shinayu? If we can save Kushina this time, let's go get some barbecue together, I'll help you confess then." Minato stumbled, but quickly regained his balance, his frozen expression softening slightly. "Thank you." Minato knew exactly why Shinayu said that. Excessive anxiety often affects one's judgment at the most crucial moments. He probably said that just to distract himself. But Minato didn't point it out. As brothers, some things simply didn't need to be said. Nothing, and just like that, the two boys remained silent, charging forward. They didn't notice, no, or rather, they didn't think about the figure following them from a distance. He had white hair, and though he was clearly a young man, his stern appearance, coupled with the sharp knife he always carried on his back, made anyone afraid to approach him. It was an illusion of extreme sharpness, a premonition of being chopped to pieces. True, Shinayu had guessed that the enemy, capable of abducting Konoha village, must be formidable, but he hadn't anticipated the magnitude of Konoha village's loss, leaving them indifferent. The Sandaime not only dispatched immediate assistance, but to minimize the damage and impact, he sent only one person, that formidable young man. At this point, his legend had yet to spread throughout the ninja world. Only the Sandaime knew that this young man, nearly the same age as his disciples, had already reached the threshold of Kage rank. Coupled with his unique fighting style, he would become Konoha's sharpest fang. The dividing line of the war, landing from the treetops, neither Shinayu nor Minato made any sound. Minato carefully picked up the remaining red hair from the ground. There was no doubt that these hairs, which still had the residual warmth of the skin, had just been cut off not long ago, that is to say, they are very close to Kushina. In other words, their enemies are also very close. Minato nodded silently to Shinayu, then drew a few combat codes in the air with his right hand, as if communicating something. Shinayu also nodded silently, but his left hand seemed to shake slightly, almost unconsciously, as if preparing for battle. Indeed, such an ambiguous gesture could never be a signal, as such a crude message would easily be overlooked by his teammates, but Minato was an exception. Bang! Almost as soon as Shinayu gave the signal, the deadly black figure descended from the sky. The Thunder Ninja's Ford Protector. And without a doubt, the blue light radiating from it was the symbol of the Thunder God's armor. A Jonin. This guy is a Jonin. With the strength of a Jonin, a sneak attack at near zero range. No matter how hard they tried, the two brats from Konoha village had no chance of escaping. Puff! The palm pierced Shinayu's chest, the terrifying impact completely destroying the contours of his chest, nearly breaking it. His fragile neck vertebrae clearly couldn't withstand such a heavy blow, twisting unnaturally to the side in just a moment. One of them escaped. In this sudden and catastrophic attack, Shinayu was almost instantly killed by the opponent's surprise attack. It seemed that only Minato, utilizing his speed that far surpassed that of an average Chunin and the intelligence he had learned in advance, escaped. Indeed, Minato had known about the surprise attack long ago, and had prepared to escape long beforehand. All of this was due to Shinayu's little move. Trying to sneak attack Shinayu, who could predict the future? This was almost impossible. Even if he was at the level of Kage, Shinayu would definitely be able to see through the signs of an attack within half a second with his precognitive ability. And that almost meaningless gesture was only understood by Minato, who was with him day and night. Bang! The cruel expression of the Jonin froze on his face. He was determined to deliver a fatal blow, but it only hit the substitution technique. At the same time, the ground suddenly cracked, and in the crack of the rock, suddenly rushed out with a kunai in hand. So that's why, the sharp kunai pierced directly into the throat of the Reinin Jonin before he could react. That's right, this is the real fatal blow. Who stipulated that you must shout found it after discovering the enemy? Chapter 14, Death Fight. Die? A long-prepared surprise attack. With this blow, Shinayu couldn't even estimate the damage to the kunai. He forcibly attached chakra to the weapon. If he didn't, he probably wouldn't be able to succeed. After all, the opponent was a Jonin, and he also possessed the Thunder God armor, known for its defensive power. Although from the appearance, the intermittent lightning was completely incomparable to the Raikage, I'm afraid relying on the defensive power of this jutsu wouldn't be so easy to kill him. Crack! Surprisingly, even with the use of chakra to increase the kunai's sharpness, Shinayu's attack alone was still unable to penetrate the Thunder God armor. According to memory, the Third Hokage once used this technique to fight the enemy for 3 days and 3 nights, covering his companion's retreat, and finally died of exhaustion. How could such an ninjutsu be so easily destroyed? Kid, the kunai shattered, and his momentary surprise turned into utter anger. The Thunder God Armor, the Jonin of the Thunder Ninja, couldn't believe that he was almost killed by a little kid. He didn't understand why his sneak attack was dodged. Was he seen through? Impossible. It was just 2 little brats. His chakra hiding abilities shouldn't have been discovered. Why? Was his speed degraded? No, not at all. This substitution technique was clearly pre-planned, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to hide underground using earth escape techniques. What the hell was going on? What the hell was going on? Go to hell, the Thunder God Armor didn't disappear. Maintaining this state, even ordinary taijutsu attacks from the Thunder Ninja possessed power unmatched by ordinary humans. Killing a brat at this distance, too easy. Truly too easy. More like a self-hypnotic obsession, the Jonin had no intention of pursuing Minato. Having just experienced a near-death experience, he instinctively wanted to eliminate the brats that had once posed a threat to him. There was no other way to calm his rage, his fear. Punch. Filled with rage and fear, he delivered a punch, not even bothering to adjust his chakra flow. Even the Thunder God Armor behind him unknowingly weakened. Bang! A powerful punch, a punch that tore through the ground, instantly ripped the defeated Shinayu into shreds. Not a single piece of flesh remained intact, all transformed into a cloud of smoke. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Indeed, even Shinayu himself hadn't believed he could finish his opponent with a single blow. When do humans die? In anger? Or in fear? The rocks at his feet suddenly exploded, and a figure finally became clear in the suddenly rising white smoke. Senju Shinayu, here I come. Ever since he decided to descend and investigate, Shinayu had already sent his shadow clones underground, and upon anticipating the enemy's attack, he had immediately used the substitution jutsu. But at this moment, the original Shinayu didn't evade, but instead transformed and hid. Yes, he had been waiting for just such an opportunity. Chakra Scalpel. Aiming at the opponent's unevenly distributed chakra on his back, using his half-second foresight to predict the future, Jinayong sought the area where he could deliver a fatal blow. That's right, this is true foresight, choosing the fatal attack position in advance, predicting the opponent's attack path. This is why Jinayong has such an absolute advantage in close combat. Because he knows. However, this foresight also has its errors. Don't be ridiculous, kid. People only die when they become arrogant. Go to hell, you damned kid. If his movements can't keep up with the opponent's speed, then, even if he can see it, it's meaningless, because the opponent's counterattack will come even faster. Puff. This time, blood truly gushed from Jinayong's shoulder, because he truly couldn't avoid this blow. But, thanks to his special ability, he could even see the future. The chakra scalpel could no longer directly strike the opponent, so Jinayong could only weakly grasp the opponent's arm that pierced his shoulder with his own hands. No, his left hand was no longer usable, and he couldn't even feel the flow of chakra. All that remained was his right hand. Ahem, a weak cough echoed. Ahoh, for a child like Jinayong who had never seen blood, this was truly painful. Even though the foresight had prepared him mentally, it still hurt too much? That's not right. The raging Jonin's expression was already distorted with excitement, but Jinayong's weak voice seemed to tinge with laughter. Where's the person? Chakra began to invade. In this position where there was no distance at all, Jinayong, who had absolute control over chakra, finally had this golden opportunity. Through foresight. No, he didn't even need to try. Jinayong knew that an opponent covered in Thunder God armor was completely invulnerable. Even if they had diverted their chakra elsewhere, his own attacks alone would be powerless to penetrate their defenses. So, the next best thing, what if he could break through their Thunder God armor? As long as he could get close enough and maintain it for a while, using his own chakra control, it wasn't impossible to completely disrupt the opponent's chakra flow in a short period of time. But, even if he did, he would have already lost his ability to fight after being attacked at close range by the Thunder armor, right? Aha, never mind, I've even thought of that. Jinayong closed his eyes tiredly, but the opponent's last look of surprise still lingered in his mind. No one had ever said that Jinayong was fighting alone. In the bushes further out, Minato silently accumulated chakra until he had completely wrapped his kunai in sharp wind attribute chakra, and then he launched his attack. People only die when they think they are about to win. That's right, at the moment the thunder armor disappeared, at the moment the opponent was about to win. Bang! Shin-Aong fell heavily to the ground, his shoulder completely numb. If I leave it alone, he'll die from excessive blood loss soon, right? Well, compared to that, this time we killed a Jonin. Ahuho with only the strength of 2 Jinan. If I go back and tell my parents, they won't believe it. Minato seemed to yell. I couldn't hear, clearly. Go quickly, Minato. Kushina, we're still waiting. Mayu's world finally fell into darkness. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15, is this the legendary bonus level? First, there's the pain. Well, if I had to describe it, it's the feeling of growing bones. Believe me, you won't like that feeling, but it's a good thing. Dead people don't feel pain. So, before waking up, I'll do my usual body check. Left arm okay, right arm okay, left leg okay, right leg okay. Second brother okay. Well, it seems nothing's been lost, right? Memory and control of his body began to return. Shinayu remembered that the last thing he did before losing consciousness was to ambush a Jonin with Minato. Now that I think about it, it's insane. Shinayu's expression instantly turned bitter. Youth is prone to mistakes. In their passion, they don't care about what they're doing. Judging from the situation now, even though they killed the Jonin, if it were on the battlefield, he probably wouldn't last long. This isn't a good habit. They'll be going to the battlefield soon. Well, after all this time, it's time to sit up after a long sleep or dizziness. Don't stand up immediately upon regaining consciousness. According to Shinayu's medical knowledge, doing so puts a heavy strain on the brain. But has the medical technology at Konoha Village's hospital really advanced to this level? Shinayu tried to move his left arm. It was completely fine, even the pain was gone. He remembered that during the battle, it seemed like his entire shoulder blade had been broken. Shinayu had once thought he would have to learn how to form hand seals with one hand in order to continue fighting. Judging from the current situation, without summoning chakra, Shinayu tried to form all 12 ninja seals. It was done in 5 seconds. It looked like there was nothing wrong with it, and his hand was just as flexible as before. But then again, he'd been awake for so long, why hadn't a beautiful, gentle, lovely, and generous nurse come to check on him? Wait. Was it because he hadn't followed a normal patient procedure and screamed before waking up? Yes, that must be it. Shinayu suddenly realized it was because he hadn't opened the seal the right way. So, before that heartbreaking scream could escape his lips, the door to the infirmary slowly swung open. It wasn't a familiar friend of Jinayu's, or even his parents, who had known him for years. Instead, it was a figure Jinayu couldn't have imagined entering the infirmary. Third Hokage-sama, Sarutobi wasn't the decrepit sage he would be decades later. He was now in the prime of his ninja life, his mental and physical strength, chakra reserves, and even his combat experience at a relatively balanced peak. He was the most powerful ninja of his time. Unlike Jiraiya, or even Hatake Tsukumo, this man before him was a true Hokage-level expert. Wait, something wasn't right? Jinayu's alarm flared. While he and the Sandaime weren't exactly related, he was merely a disciple. Well, that sounded impressive, but in reality, he'd never even had the opportunity to meet him alone before. No, why would he want to meet with such an old man? PFFT, PFFT, PFFT. I finally convinced myself that a village Hokage couldn't possibly be gay. I had to stay calm. Look, the Sandaime-sama has a serious expression on his face. It's obvious that he has something important to discuss with me. How could a little kid like me possibly get in the way of the Hokage-sama? Of course, Shinayong's complex mental activity and constipated expression caught the Sandaime's attention, but the old man didn't care. He nodded calmly, then walked over to Shinayong and ripped open the bandages around his shoulders, revealing a large expanse of smooth, white skin. Wait. This isn't right. Is this the transformation jutsu used by Danzo or Orochimaru? Wait. Hokage-sama, what are you doing? Damn it. I'll fight to the death. Don't come over here. I'm calling for help. As expected, after a careful inspection, the Sandaime showed a relieved expression. then smiled at Xianyang. "How do you feel, kid?" "Ah, much better, Third Hokage," Xianyang answered a little stiffly, and the corners of his eyes were still twitching. If the old man Third Hokage made any move, he would bite his tongue and commit suicide immediately. "Damn it, how can I bear this kind of thing? I can only die rather than obey." Yet, the Sandaime nodded with relief. "Don't be so restrained, don't worry, Minato and Kushina are safe." Sarutobi's movements and tone gradually became normal, which made Xianyang breathe a sigh of relief. "Speaking of Minato and Kushina, this kid carried Kushina and me back by himself?" Sarutobi seemed to see the confusion in the kid's eyes, and his smile became even wider. It was indeed the right move to arrange Jiraiya's little apprentice in Tsukumo's team. Both him and the kid named Namikaze Minato were the hope of Konoha. He subconsciously did not consider Uchiha, because of his surname, he would not be a combat force that the Hokage could trust after all. It was your team leader, Tsukumo Hatake, who rescued you. Although it's a good thing for young people to be passionate, don't make decisions rashly next time. You won't be so lucky every time. Later, his tone even became stern. Whether it was Shinayu or Minato, they both had huge potential. In such a situation, it would undoubtedly be a waste of talent to come into contact with the high-end combat power of this world too early. If it weren't for the fact that these two people were from the lineage of Hokage, Sarutobi would even consider postponing the time for the two to go to the front line. It would be a pity if such geniuses died early, but some things are so helpless. As the grandchildren of the Hokage, they cannot retreat in the war, but the ability of these two kids to work together to kill a senior ninja at this age is indeed worthy of recognition. Rest well. You'll probably be discharged tonight. Come to my office early tomorrow morning. Come alone. The Sandaime kindly stroked his hair before leaving the ward. Meanwhile, Shinayu still couldn't understand the old man's purpose for coming today. He'd even put Hatake Tsukumo's matter aside for the time being. It was as if he'd somehow found a powerful and formidable support. Shinayu shook his head. With the information he had at hand, even if he racked his brains, he probably wouldn't come up with any conclusions. But one thing was clear to him. From today on, Senju Shinayu was no longer just some nameless figure in Konoha village. He was deeply etched with the mark of the Hokage lineage. Well, even though he seemed to have done nothing, could this be the legendary bonus level? Leaving the ward, the Sandaime took a deep breath, his gaze sharpening. Notify the elders immediately. I need to convene a meeting of elders immediately. He didn't turn back, but a ninja wearing a fox mask suddenly emerged from the shadows by the wall. He responded with a word and then vanished. Senju Shinayu, a name like that wouldn't have even made it to the village's highest echelons a day ago, even if he and fellow Jinan, Namikaze Minato, had defeated the Rainan's Jonin. What truly caught the Sandaime's attention was the medical report provided by the hospital. He'd personally verified it today, so it couldn't be wrong. His powerful fists clenched silently, and Sarutobi's gaze held only determination. This might be Konoha's next chance for resurgence. Chapter 16, Come on Sharingan, I'll torture you to death according to tradition. In reality, how could Jinayang, who had long since assumed he was fine, actually wait until nightfall to go home? He had no idea how long he'd slept, and he absolutely couldn't afford not to go home and tell his parents he was safe. With his mother's personality, if she'd known I'd rather sleep here than go home, my ears would have been in trouble. Well, at least there was some good news, right? Halfway through, Jinayang had already thought of an excuse. Judging by the extent of his wound's healing, well, there wasn't even a scar left, so a conservative estimate was probably over 2 weeks. After all, he'd trained in medical ninjutsu for a while, so it seemed like he could at least be helpful in diagnosing injuries. Well, as for avoiding his mother's nagging, he'd already found a reason. Perhaps the only benefit of the Sandaime's visit today was that he wouldn't have to worry about having to give her a lie. Well, at least he'd completed this non-mission and earned the Sandaime's favor. Such opportunities don't come around all the time. Ahem. Okay, let's sort out the process. Anyway, upon entering, greet the family first, then admit your mistake, and finally, before mom loses her temper, tell her that the Sandaime is very optimistic about you. Yeah, that's it, the perfect plan. Mother, I'm back. Jinayang tiptoed into the house. The once familiar house had become silent, even the usual sounds of laundry and folding quilts gone. Had she gone out to buy groceries? Impossible. According to her normal routine, mom should be folding the quilts by this time. Puff, Just as Jinayong was still puzzled, a familiar embrace enveloped him from behind. That familiar smell had been with him since he was born, whether he liked it or not, no matter where he went, no matter what the future held, he would never forget that smell, nor would he forget the woman's soft sobs at that moment. "Mom," she was stunned at first, but soon Jinayong's expression warmed up. He gently held the hands that were crossed in front of him and hugged him tightly. "Don't worry, I'm back, nothing will happen." The dividing line of the 7th team's assembly, the matter of rescuing Kushina has finally come to an end. Although Jinayong had a more intuitive feeling about his abnormal physical fitness after confirming the time afterwards. 2 days, only 2 days had passed, and this had to count the half-day when he lost consciousness and was comatose. In fact, on the day when the seriously injured Jinayong was sent back, his injuries had already been healed. This is simply a fantasy. Then, the next day, a visit to the Sandame's office gave Shinayu a huge surprise. According to the Sandame's description, Shinayu's chakra didn't possess any unique properties, but coincidentally, its immense vitality led the elder to speculate on a possible connection to Shinayu's origins. Since then, no member of the Senju clan has ever awakened such a talent, and even his younger brother, Senju Hiramika, hasn't possessed such miraculous power. However, the only person in the world to have used wood release was the former First Hokage, Senju Hoshirama. That man, possessing near divine power, single-handedly defeated Uchiha Madara. Possessing the Nine Tails, he was the only ninja to have ever been able to defeat that monster, a legendary figure. The wood release chakra, which hadn't reappeared since the First Hokage's death, was likely residing within Shinayu's body. While it couldn't be confirmed, and Shinayu hadn't yet shown any signs of being able to use wood release, his terrifying vitality and resilience were undeniable. I have to admit, as a member of the Senju clan, this was the first time in his life that Shinayu felt grateful for his origins. Get this, that's wood release, known as the strongest bloodline. That deceased first generation, with just this bloodline, eclipsed all the ninjas of that era. The reason the third generation summoned him to his office was actually to hand him a scroll containing wood release research materials, and then immediately destroyed it after supervising him to memorize it all on the spot. After that, if there was any sign of awakening wood release, Shinayu could even request to leave the front lines immediately. Yes, this was probably the only thing Shinayu wasn't satisfied with. The war had still begun. Due to conflict between the Lightning Shinobi and Konoha, the Third Hokage even declared hostility with Konoha. But no one could have imagined that the curtain of war would ultimately be opened by the Silent Sands Shinobi. Yes, everyone had underestimated that ninja village in the desert. Under the leadership of the Third Hokage, also known as the strongest Hokage, the Sand Shinobi had accumulated considerable strength. As more and more ninjas completed their training, their thirst for resources and a burning desire for revenge for their losses during World War I ultimately led the Sand Shinobi to ignite the flames of war. Splitting their forces, one launched a direct attack on the Fire Nation's homeland, while the other began invading the buffer zone of the Rain Village. As expected, Konoha launched operations in response to this sudden conflict, and Shinayu's team, also known as the White Fang team, was assigned to the front lines at the border between the Wind and Fire Nation. Yeah, that's right. Today's the day to assemble. Well, Minato was setting off with me, which was fine, but when I arrived at the assembly point, Uchiha Usagi, nominally on my team, was already waiting there. Well, judging by that ferocious look, it seemed like he still hadn't forgotten his crushing defeat in school. Hey, what's with that look of wanting to eat me? After all, I only bumped into you. If it were any other time, Shinayu would probably have just spread his hands and sighed helplessly. After all, judging by the Sharingan's evolutionary trajectory, it would be difficult for Shinayu to contend with a 3 Magatama-wielding eagle in the future. But now, things are completely different. According to the experience of our predecessors, if you can master the use of wood release, defeating a Sharingan ninja isn't impossible. Gooey, come on, Sharingan, I'll beat you to death according to tradition. Very good, none of you are late. A serious voice came from behind, and the white-haired ninja instantly appeared in front of the three of them. Here he is, the ninja who'd eventually become a Konoha legend. Chapter 17, Funny Rookie, I like it the most. Well, even if they were 1000% reluctant, the war still broke out. Konoha's fangs certainly couldn't remain hidden in the dark forever. This time, the team that Shinayu belonged to was sent to the front line. That was the most dangerous place, But because of the tacit understanding between the major powers, before the real full-scale war broke out, a silent secret war was going on in the area that would become the main battlefield in the future. Exploration of the terrain, arrangement of traps, competition for favorable terrain. Almost every day there were brutal death battles here, and it was almost always a standard configuration of one big team and three small ones. After all, the more powerful personnel were in intense preparation for war, and only these small shrimps were responsible for such miscellaneous work. Well, in such a big background, sending out a team like Tsukumo is really, Lord Sandame, you are really too mean. Although the full-speed march made Zenayon tired, it was wartime after all, and Zenayon could still overcome such a small matter. But when he just arrived on the battlefield, there were some things that made Zenayon very concerned. Well, after all, it was a bloody battle about to be shed, but he didn't seem nervous at all. Well, these abnormalities were eventually attributed by Zenayon to his background identity as a time traveler, but in the face of the cruel struggle, he really had no time to think about these things. Today, our mission is to clear the traps set by the enemy along our front lines. If you encounter an enemy squad, destroy them immediately. Remember, don't get into a protracted battle. Tsukumo's explanation was as concise as ever. Unlike other teachers, he didn't give his students a ton of battlefield advice. Well, Shinao had already learned this lesson during the previous march, and Tsukumo preferred to use actual combat to reinforce his students' learning. Anyway, the first mission finally began, and the four members of the squad began their mission in silence. Woo, huh, inhale, exhale. Though he wasn't at all nervous, Shinao managed to maintain his best form. What followed was a bloodbath. If he died here because of carelessness, wouldn't it be a shame to live this life? Yes, he had to live. For his loving parents, for that somewhat perverted and lecherous teacher, for Minato, and, of course, for himself. He chuckled almost neurotically, and the teasing on the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. He was originally just a rookie on the battlefield, but now he seemed to have some of the temperament of a veteran, with a disdain for the smoke of gunpowder and a mockery of blood. With his right hand, he drew a shuriken from the ninja tool bag at an extremely fast speed. Without a careful observation, Zenayon threw the shuriken in a certain direction in the dense forest without hesitation. Puff, the sound of a sharp blade entering the flesh was heard. The sand ninja, who was still holding a kunai, never understood until his death why he was killed just before he could make a move while hiding in the bushes in the sand waiting for a sneak attack. Aha, isn't this just asking for his life? Funny rookie. I love it the most, the dividing line of strength crushing. Stop. They are already very close to the mainland of Wind Country. There are fewer and fewer bushes that can be used for hiding. Zenayon and the others have even become accustomed to burying themselves in the hot sand at any time. As Tsukumo raised his hand, everyone clenched the kunai tightly in their palms. This was already the 6th day at the front line. Each day was divided into 3 periods. The team that Shinao was in would leave the camp and head towards the area where the battle was about to begin. Even if they had checked the place the day before, they still had to be cautious because the other side had been doing the same thing. However, Konoha had gained an overwhelming advantage with the addition of Tsukumo. In just a few days, this team had slaughtered many times the number of opponents. Most of the leaders of the Sans Shinobi were Chunins, and occasionally 1 or 2 Jonins would appear. Although this was also the case for most of the Konoha side, the difference in the highest combat power made everything one-sided. Under the leadership of Tsukumo, Shinao and his party hardly encountered any opponents who could fight against them. Not to mention Tsukumo, who had almost stepped into the level of Kage. Even Shinao and the other 3 each had strength above Chunin. After a few days of training, they had almost formed their own set of fighting methods. Well, they really couldn't keep up with Tsukumo's fighting rhythm. Shinao used his foresight to provide early warning and treatment, while the battle and search for the enemy was left to Usagi, who had already opened his Sharingan. The main force was undoubtedly Minato, the fastest and most powerful. With this kind of coordination, as long as the enemy wasn't a Jonin and was willing to take their time, Shinao and his team could completely wipe out the enemy without even Tsukumo's intervention. As Shinao had said, compared to them, the enemy was just a bunch of rookies who could only afford to be killed. The only thing they had learned was to be ruthless in dealing with the enemy, like withdrawing a kunai immediately after it had penetrated a vital point. Only in this way could the enemy be most effectively inflicted, leaving no chance for a counterattack. Well, as was Tsukumo's style, this was, Of course, learned through injury. Uchiha Usagi's expression darkened. As the genius of the Uchiha clan, he was the one who had suffered the most serious damage in recent days. His sudden advance after the substitution jutsu allowed him to easily deliver a kunai into the opponent's chest. He thought the opponent was absolutely dead, but at the last moment, he was hit by the Sand Ninja's fatal blow. If Shinayu hadn't pushed him away, he might have been left with more than just a deep wound on his back. Tisk, speaking of which, that bastard didn't even thank Shinayu for saving his life, and even refused Shinayu's treatment. What a foolish pride. With a few tactical hand gestures understood only by Konoha ninjas, Shinayu and the other three dispersed. Tsukumo's judgment was never wrong. It seemed that their frenzied killing spree over the past 2 days had finally attracted the enemy's attention. At the border of the Wind Country, they seemed to have finally encountered some trouble. An elite hunting group consisting of 3 Jonin and 5 Chunin were approaching, about to encounter them. Well, it was more like they were targeting them. It just so happened that there was no point in the teacher torturing these rookies. Shinayu clenched his kunai and closed his eyes. Tsukumo's gestures were clear. He was going to strike first to draw out the 3 Jonin, while Shinayu and the others needed to remain hidden as much as possible, waiting for Tsukumo to eliminate the enemy before rescuing them. Aha! After a few days on the battlefield, Minato's combat skills had clearly become more refined. Some of his old, redundant movements had gradually disappeared, and he was now edging ever closer to that golden flash of the future. Shinayu had certainly made some progress too. His improvements in chakra control and physical techniques might not be as noticeable, but his ability to predict the future had made significant strides. He could now focus on 2 different futures simultaneously. Closing his eyes wasn't a show-off, but rather a way to concentrate. He focused all his attention on himself and Minato, who was not far away. If anything threatening them appeared, he might as well attack. Ding! The sudden sound of a kunai clattering against his eardrums was followed by a familiar groan. Damn it! Shinayu cursed inwardly and immediately left his hiding place. And you call him a genius? Can't you just hide well? Can you not expose yourself so soon? But the reality was too late to complain. Uchiha Usagi plummeted from the treetops, clearly seriously injured. His pale face hinted that this genius of the Uchiha clan had already reached his limit. But the pursuing enemy had no regard for humanity. 3 of them immediately chose to pursue. Did the other 3 prepare for an ambush? Chapter 18, It's time to save the world with a big move. What? It's the teammates who let him down at the crucial moment. Shinayu pouted. Why had he always encountered this kind of problem, from his last life until now? Wasn't it agreed before the battle that it would be the Uchiha clan's genius? Damn, Sharingan is so open. How could he not even notice the enemy was so close? At this point, he deserved to die. Stomping heavily on the tree branch, Shinayu grumbled and complained as he leaped towards where the eagle had fallen. Because of the excessive force exerted by his chakra-charged feet, he even broke the entire branch. But correspondingly, his speed was just as fast as it could be. No matter how much he complained, no matter how much he despised it, Shinayu still chose to rescue, even though he raised his hand and swung out 2 shurikens in an instant, aiming directly at the hearts of 2 of the approaching Chunin, the point where they would reach in half a second. Ding. Ding. As expected, although it was a dangerous move, how could such a direct and undisguised throw easily succeed? All Shinayu could do was delay the opponent for a moment. Then, he came face to face with the last of the 3, the Chunin. He had been lagging behind the other 3, and if Shinayu was right, he was more of a ninjutsu-oriented ninja. In such close combat, Shinayu might even be able to exploit his opponent's carelessness and instantly kill him. His kunai was perfectly positioned, his reverse grip seemingly aimed directly at the opponent's temple, but in reality, his free left hand was silently preparing a sharper chakra scalpel. In a split second, it could sever the opponent's heart. As expected, the opponent hadn't noticed Shinayu's brat's plan. In just a moment, he would have been slain by a seemingly powerless straight punch. Damn it! Unfortunately, Shinayu was unable to continue his attack. In this place? From the moment he launched his attack, the target of the foresight had been circling Shinayu. At such close range, Shinayu could even simultaneously focus on himself, the Chunin in front of him, and the falling eagle. And in just another 0.5 seconds, that damned Uchiha would fall into the perfectly concealed sand, coming into close contact with the iron spikes below. Without having practiced the golden bell and iron cloth armor, he'd probably be pierced like a sieve. The kunai, originally intended as a feint, was instantly launched to the ground, and still in the air, Shin'Aong could only turn over and kick the sand ninja on the other side, using the recoil to rush even faster towards the still falling Uchiha Eagle. This time, you've really got me killed. Accelerating to the limit, Shin'Aong finally grabbed the nearly fainted guy in his arms at the last moment. After stepping on the kunai he'd dropped earlier with an awkward posture, he narrowly avoided the opponent's carefully arranged trap. No, it wasn't that easy. Shin'Aong gave a helpless smile. This time, he'd really messed up. He quickly pulled out the two kunai still lodged in his back and tossed them aside. Luckily, he'd used his future vision to adjust his stance, so he hadn't inflicted any damage. The wound was just a bit deeper, and moving forward would probably exacerbate the bleeding. He frowned. The real problem wasn't the wound on his back, it seemed something had gone wrong with his previous plan. The trap had clearly been launched higher than the kunai, and his right foot, which he'd been using for leverage, was instantly pierced through by the protruding iron spikes. Despicable, shameless, idiot, eh? Shin'Aong instantly cursed the female lineage of the sand ninjas going back 18 generations. Damn it, iron spikes are iron spikes, and barbs, too. His forcibly extracted right foot was already a horrible sight, and cold sweat streamed down his forehead. If it hadn't been for his recent focus on spiritual cultivation, Shin'Aong would have fainted instantly. What bad luck. If it had been poisoned, it would have been even more tragic. The eagle in his arms was asleep as if it were dead, completely unresponsive to all the tossing and turning. Holy crap. I'm going to get screwed this time. If Minato hadn't just arrived and temporarily held off the three Chunin in ambush, Shin'Aong would have been dead by now. But even then, he still had no advantage. The three opposing Chunin didn't give Shin'Aong much time to breathe. No sooner had their surprise attack ended than three more, dressed in sand ninja attire, launched a frenzied attack. With one dead and one seriously injured, there was no way they could even escape. Tisk. Was he cornered so quickly? Shin'Aong quickly placed his eagle behind him, and two kunai appeared in his hands almost simultaneously. He sighed, calming himself down a bit. While using unfinished moves so soon in combat was foolish, given the current situation, Minato and Tsukumo probably couldn't be relied upon for the time being, not to mention the Uchiha's burden. If he didn't take a gamble, he might actually die right here. Closing his eyes, not even forming a seal, Shin'Aong's hands dropped quietly to his sides, as if he had given up resistance. Ninjutsu, innate time control. His blood began to flow faster, along with his heartbeat, breathing, and even every physiological activity. That's right, everything about Shin'Aong seemed to be fast-forwarded, and of course, that lightning-fast thrust was also accelerated. Innate time control, triple speed. Indeed, as his mental strength grew, Shin'Aong's suspicions became definitively confirmed. He was certain he possessed some kind of gift related to time. After that successful assassination of the Jonin, his gift had gradually awakened. Through a special manipulation of chakra, Shin'Aong discovered he could actually alter the flow of time, though only for himself. If he could double the speed of the world he was in, his movements would naturally double. If he could increase the speed tenfold, his movements would naturally increase as well. But if he truly did that, he would surely be tired of living. 10 times the normal heart rate, over 1,000 beats per minute, it would be absurd if this bastard didn't die. However, pushing the limits of acceleration wasn't impossible, but it was incredibly painful. Ultimately, a powerful move wasn't something anyone could easily unleash, let alone one that Shin'Aong hadn't yet perfected. Shin'Aong had assumed this ultimate move would only be unleashed in a split second between the two sides, but crucially, Shin'Aong had to accumulate energy for a short period of time before successfully triggering this seemingly impressive acceleration. This meant that once he activated his innate time control, there was no way to stop it. Conversely, once the fight began, he might never have the chance to use it. Both stabbed men shared expressions of shock. One delivered a fatal blow, but the other instantly vanished into smoke. No matter, this was a foregone conclusion. Without hesitation, Shin'Aong instantly transformed into a dark shadow and charged towards the Chunin further behind. Now he can only race against time. Because there is no test, who knows how long his body can withstand this state? P.S. Oh my god. Since everyone thinks the original name is good, let's change it to 74's original name. Chapter 19, Your Sister? The Sand Ninja, still preparing his jutsu, clearly wasn't prepared for Shin's sudden outburst. He was certain the opponent had already lost his ability to move. After all, he had set the trap himself, the poisoned barbed iron spikes. Even for a trap, this was definitely luxurious, judging by the poison's effects. Even if the opponent wasn't dead, he was definitely half dead. How could he possibly be charging at him like a ghost? No. Impossible. Even the wind-style jutsu he'd prepared initially failed due to nervousness, let alone any incredible feat he could perform in such a critical moment. Shin's greatly increased speed didn't give him a chance to beg for mercy. A simple, direct stab, and the tiny hole in the heart had already claimed the Chunin's life. Well, even though Shin, a Genin, had fought 3 opponents alone, carrying a heavy burden, and had killed 2 of them, he couldn't smile at all now. He had reached his limit. His heart felt like it was about to explode, his body's instincts distracting him, and the effects of his natural time control gradually faded. Ahem, compared to his previous injury, this mouthful of hot blood seemed to drain all of Jinyoung's strength. His body instantly went limp, unable to support the weight, making him want to collapse. How could that be possible? This was a battlefield. If he just fell like that, he'd be dead. Kneeling on one knee, Jinyoung panted, raising his kunai. One more Chunin. If it were any other time, if he hadn't been injured, if it weren't for this desert with no shelter. Unfortunately, there weren't so many ifs. His chakra had been depleted by the previous reckless attack. What remained was simply flowing through his body, completely uncontrollable. His right hand, gripping the kunai, was trembling slightly from his blurred consciousness. Helplessly, Jinyoung could only use his left hand to steady his wrist, though even that had little effect. Physical strength, mental strength. Everything has reached its limit. If there is no rescue from the gods, I am afraid I will really be trapped and killed here. What the hell? This is not a game. If I die, I will never come back to life. So Jinyoung would rather bite his tongue and force himself to face this cruel reality. He can't die. That's right, he absolutely cannot die here. Jinyoung, who has been searching for enemies everywhere, suddenly froze for a moment, then turned around without hesitation and began to heal the wound of the eagle not far away. Above his head, the sand ninja holding a kunai had already raised the butcher knife of the god of death, but he seemed to be oblivious to everything. Hiss, it was just the sound of blood flying, and it was even impossible to tell what kind of weapon was causing the problem. The cold light disappeared before people could distinguish its shape. What was left was the snow-white hair. For the first time since the war began, this kind of good news had appeared in Shinayu's foresight. Konoha White Fang, fellow Jonin Hatake Sakumo, had demonstrated with his actions what truly distinguished him from the common foes, even including the time spent luring the enemy. He had already eliminated 3 of his opponents before Shinayu's side had even finished fighting, and, of course, without a single wound. Finally receiving this powerful external aid, Shinayu's heart finally settled. He turned around, cradling the injured body, and began to provide first aid to Uchiha. Though he'd been the one fighting the entire battle, Uchiha, who'd been holding everyone back from the start, was the more troublesome. Seriously, the last wound had definitely not healed, and now it was on his back, adding insult to injury. With excessive blood loss, he might die here if he didn't get treatment quickly. Shinyoung said nothing. He dragged his sick body to quickly rip open Uchiha's clothing, revealing 2 hideous, intertwined wounds. Tisk, 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 the wounds were not shallow. And what was with that shoddy bandage? Shinyoung didn't have time to think. Healing chakra instantly enveloped his palm. Though the strain caused him to nearly faint again, his superior mental strength allowed him to persevere. The wound on his back began to heal at a noticeable rate, at least the bleeding had stopped after the first aid. Even Uchiha, who had been unconscious, frowned. Knowing pain is a good thing. It proves that this guy is not dead yet. Let's see if he will be so foolish next time. Jinyoung complained while trying hard to turn this guy over. Jinyoung did not witness the battle between the eagle and the eagle. If there are other wounds, all the efforts just now will be in vain. Be a good person to the end and send the Buddha to the west. Well, it was hard enough for the exhausted Jinyoung to control his own chakra, and at the moment he had no ability to predict the future to use. But if God could give him another chance, he would never rashly tear the other person's clothes just now. The body had just turned around when the moan hinted at the possibility of some misfortune, and as Jinyoung finally turned this disappointing teammate over, he suddenly fell into a state of panic. The two big white rabbits that were looming among the bandages instantly overturned the character card of Uchiha Eagle. This guy who had always been at odds with Shinai, always causing trouble for him, and holding him back was undoubtedly a girl. Your sister, Shinai screamed, finally collapsing to the ground due to the overwhelming amount of information. Tsukumo and Minato, standing nearby, also looked conflicted. Well, after being with a teammate for so long, it was already difficult for them to accept that she was a woman disguised as a man. Shinai, what on earth are you trying to do by throwing yourself into someone's arms? Chapter 20, The War Begins in a Dream. Jinyoung thought he'd had a dream, one that was supposed to be erotic, but ended with him being chopped off by a hatchet. Go to hell. His rotating Mangekyou Sharingan fixed his gaze on him, and a nameless fire began to rise from his lower abdomen. Sister, please put on your shirt, please. This is cheating, and it's really hard for me to fight you. Ahem. The unpleasant smell of blood ended the dream. Jinyoung was certain it wasn't the hot blood rising to his throat from internal bleeding, but a much stronger stench of blood. Fighting back the discomfort, Jinyoung struggled to sit up. What? A seriously ill person can't just get up? Come on, this is war. If you keep lying there, others will be happy to come and finish you off. Of course, Jinyoung couldn't just sit there and watch himself become someone else's experience and military exploits. Although he felt a little dizzy when he first opened his eyes, he was at least inside a tent. Did he have to be temporarily sent back to the camp for treatment? Jinyoung instinctively touched his right foot. A wound like this, pierced through the shoe, would have been terrifying for most people, not to mention the large piece of flesh left behind by the barb. Under normal circumstances, such an injury would have been crippling. In fact, if the poison had been added, it wasn't impossible that he would have died instantly. But the feel of his fingers revealed that, aside from the holes in his shoe, his foot was exactly the same as before, not even a scar remained. Tisk, tisk, tisk. This discovery brought a hint of smugness to someone's lips. It seemed as if, since their last battle against the Jonin, their healing abilities had become increasingly remarkable. If this trend continued, perhaps they could one day emulate the Shodaime, recovering from injuries without even forming hand seals while fighting an enemy. Are you awake? The door curtain was drawn open, and Jinyoung could confirm the owner of the voice without even using his eyes. He stretched out his right hand and scolded with a smile, my legs and feet are not working well yet. Why don't you pull me up quickly? For Minato, this little bit of verbal battle was nothing to admit defeat. He carefully helped Jinyoung up. Although it was not his wish to send a patient who had just recovered out on a mission at this time, they had no choice as they were on the front line. As the war started, Minato's combat uniform was obviously stained with a lot of blood, and his whole body exuded a faint fishy smell. Although as men, the two brothers have never been very clean, it was obviously not Minato's style to make things so messy. Yet, he nodded calmly. The tension on the front lines had been building for days, and it was finally about to explode. It seems one of the three Jonin Tsukumo-sensei eliminated that day was a high-ranking enemy ninja. You've been unconscious for about 7 hours, and we've already made our first contact. Minato's voice was almost silent, and Shinai merely nodded. But he knew neither of them was as calm as they appeared. The war had begun. Compared to the mopping up missions of the previous 2 days, this was the most brutal time. On the front lines, unless one possessed far superior strength, like Tsukumo now or Minato in the future, anyone could be swiftly slain. This was why even Jonin wouldn't choose to perform large-scale ninjutsu alone in the front lines. Powerful ninjutsu consumed a tremendous amount of chakra, and moreover, it was more likely to attract the attention of the enemy ninja. The more dazzling one was on the battlefield, the more likely they were to die. Minato and Shinai's strength, despite their devastating performance, was only at the level of a Chunin. While they could still maintain a certain advantage over the average Chunin in a one-on-many fight, what if that number expanded to 5? 10. Information on the Sand Shinobi was still unclear, but Konoha, on the front lines bordering the Wind Country, had assembled over 200 Chunin and above elite troops. The ninjas' high mobility made them unsuitable for formation warfare, but conversely, they possessed a far more formidable pinpoint strike capability than the average unit. Survival on the battlefield depended half on strength, and half on luck. When will the next attack be? The Sand Shinobi were likely the instigators of the first round of attacks, but Konoha was clearly not one to be trifled with. Shinai estimated that the next counterattack was likely being meticulously planned. About 20 minutes later, Minato handed a new ninja bag to Shinayu. It contains 2 ration pills. Also, since we're facing a sand ninja who specializes in poison, I've also provided 2 simple antidotes and a hemostatic bandage, Minato briefly explained, and Shinayu listened as he opened the bag and carefully examined it. It wasn't that he didn't trust Minato, a mature ninja always took responsibility for their own life. In reality, no 2 ninjas' ninja bags were exactly alike. The placement of items, the types of items carried, the quantity, everything needed to be tailored to their individual preferences. Remember to call me before you go. Shinayu stretched his muscles slightly. After resting for so long, I need to recharge my chakra first. Yes, get ready. Taking a deep breath, Shinayu calmed himself down a bit. The battle was about to begin, and he needed to focus. Focus, ahem, okay, even though Shinayu had been avoiding it since waking up. How could he possibly forget the culprit who had caused his coma? How will I face those adorable big white rabbits in the future? No, how will I face that transvestite who has always been dressed as a man? Chapter 21. Before going, check carefully whether there is a detonating talisman. Well, since that's the case, there's no choice. After this battle, we'll go home and get married. Damn it. As a member of the Senju clan, how could anyone allow Senju Shinayu to do such shameful things with an Uchiha girl? This is clearly a Romeo and Juliet plot, okay? That's called a feud. A feud. Oh, no. That's not the point. How could Shinayu take home a tomboy who's been pretending to be a boy for so many years? How is that any different from being gay? Deep breath, the battle is imminent. How could I be distracted by something like this? Yet, she was unconscious at the time, so she probably didn't understand what was going on. Yet, that must be it. From now on, I'll just treat her like an ordinary teammate, just like an ordinary teammate, an ordinary teammate, an ordinary teammate, an ordinary. God damn it, what the hell? Which bastard said a lie repeated 1,000 times becomes the truth? I've been babbling on and on, why haven't you reacted at all? Jinayong's palm slammed down on his face. If he could help it, he didn't want to face this terrifying world anytime soon. In fact, if he weren't at war, he would have feigned illness and fled. He was just kidding, doing that now would make him a deserter, right? He'd definitely be hung up in the camp by the frontline commander, tortured, then killed, then tortured again as a warning to others, right? Well, instead of dwelling on all that, let's deal with the current situation first. Ever since a long time ago, it seems like every injury Jinayong sustained marked a significant improvement, and this one was pretty serious. So, is that so? His chakra activity surged again, that uncanny healing ability becoming terrifying. If this trend continued, should he consider stabbing himself a few times just for fun? Well, that thought was just a passing thought. Who, except for Saiyans, would want to be beaten half to death at any moment? And even if it was a Saiyan, what if he accidentally killed him? Mayu, Minato's friendly, sun-kissed voice slid into the tent once more. 20 minutes had flown by so quickly. Here I come. Standing up, Mayu adjusted his combat readiness one last time, his ninja tool bag securely tucked away at his waist. Besides the standard equipment everyone possessed, Mayu had also carefully tucked 2 rolled-up detonating tags inside. Compared to ordinary civilian ninja, this was one of the advantages of being from a large family. Detonating tags were a luxury item. How could a common Jinan possibly possess them? Now that I think about how Shikamaru used countless detonating tags in the original story while chasing the Otonin quartet, not to mention the more specialized flashing tags and the like. Tisk, what a prodigal son, Mayu said, his habitual playful smile curling up. It was unclear whether he was mocking some unborn prodigy or lamenting his own ill-fated fate. Of course, because of this momentary distraction, Shinayong also missed some important information hidden in Minato's tone. Although he didn't have such abnormal recovery ability as Shinayong, Eagle, who had simply lost blood, woke up long before Shinayong recovered, Minato firmly believed that if he hadn't been in the camp, Shinayong would have been chopped into pieces long ago. Meili Udao bless you. Be careful of the dividing line under your feet. The playful smile on his lips remained undiminished, even in the final moment when the opponent's pupils dilated, perverted and disgusting. Please take care of me, he said, and then with a smile, he pulled out the kunai stuck in the opponent's throat. Well, how many times has this happened? Looking at the kunai that had been worn out again, Xianyang could only shake his head helplessly and throw away the weapon that had accompanied him for no more than 15 minutes, then took over the weapon in the hands of the enemy who was still unwilling to close his eyes. At least at the beginning, the three of them, led by Tsukumo, charged into battle. But as the battle dragged on, this small group of four gradually dispersed. Well, aside from the occasional tacit cooperation between Minato and Shinayu, this newly formed team hadn't really gotten used to each other, so their strategy was mostly independent. To put it bluntly, everyone was self-centered, finding opponents they admired and pulling them aside for solo fights. Shinai was even more lazy. He even consciously began to move to the edge of the battlefield. The once bustling battlefield was reduced to a few small and large ones here. With Shinai's current level, remaining unscathed in such a low-intensity fight wasn't difficult. But he never let his guard down because of this. No kidding, even a Hokage would die instantly if a shuriken pierced his brain. If he let his guard down here, that would be truly a life of despair. Soon, Shinai's incredibly efficient killing spree attracted the enemy's attention. A makeshift squad of 3 Chunin silently began to close in on Shinayu's position. During this time, Jinan continued to charge at Shinayu with a determined determination to die. Well, was this an encirclement? What a pity. Shinayu, with his exceptional chakra control, was also quite capable of perception. Cultivating the spiritual power of the Senju clan, he could easily multitask on the battlefield. How could he not notice such an obvious encirclement? Finally, one of the long laid-in ambushes lost his mind. Pulling out a kunai, he thought he had found a flaw in Shinayu and rushed towards his target like a whirlwind. Almost at the same time, the other two also took this opportunity to rush out quickly. It was almost exactly the same as a few hours ago, with the three of them covering each other's charge. The difference was that this time, Shinai no longer had any burdens to protect. He turned sideways, avoiding his opponent's fatal blow, and almost turned around with his opponent's body. A light side kick from his foot completely threw the attacker off balance. But this wasn't the most fatal thing. Because Shinai had almost switched positions with his opponent, all the attacks originally targeted at him were now directed at the unfortunate Chunin. Ding! With a sudden retraction, Shinai easily parried the opponent's first wave of attacks. Furthermore, with a foot on one of the Chunin's back, Shinai seized the opportunity to turn the tide and dismantle his arm. Senju Shinai, I'm here too. Damn it, his well-planned and impressive appearance was once again undone. Shinai delivered a desperate kick to the Sand Ninja's back, his body evading the recoil. At the exact spot where he had been, a kunai with a detonating tag arrived. Bang! The flames and turbulence made the usually calm Shinai somewhat flustered. He fiercely pulled a brand new kunai and shuriken from his ninja tool bag, his expression almost ferocious. This crazy woman. Not far away, the two Magatama Sharingan swirled rapidly in the eyes of the eagle. She glared coldly at the survivor Shinai, then stormed off. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Dangerous Mission. For the wretched, intelligent Jinayang, the only heart-stopping moment of his first battle was that detonating tag. In fact, thanks to his timely avoidance, he was virtually unscathed, save for a few minor scrapes. Given his resilience, he should have been completely unscathed by the time he returned to camp. But for Jinayang, this crazy woman's action still served as a wake-up call. He could tell that that fleeting glance wasn't a joke. She truly wanted to kill him. You're kidding? He helplessly covered his face. For Jinayang, this was an unprovoked disaster. He swore to Deng that he had no intention of taking advantage of her. It was merely a doctor's most qualified battlefield emergency response. Besides, the ones stripped naked before were all rough guys like Minato, so who knew there would be a strange woman disguised as a man among them? Of course, before striking out, Jinayang had even fantasized that this charming scene would eventually blossom into a passionate love affair, and that he would naturally achieve his dream of a happy ending. But cruel reality, with a detonating talisman, shattered all of Jinayang's fantasies. The situation now seemed like a mortal enemy. Logically, this wasn't the way it should be in the ninja world. On a battlefield where life and death were at stake, fussing over such trivial matters would surely lead to a short life. As they say, for a doctor, patients have no gender. Well, while he wasn't exactly impassive, he didn't really have to kill him, did he? After all, we'd been classmates for years, right? We were ninjas from the same village, right? This was wartime. Such an approach would definitely lead to suspicions of treason or espionage. And that was the simplest way for Jinyoung to resolve the situation. Now, he was no longer the obscure little figure he once was. Accepted as a disciple by Jiraiya and even favored by the Third Hokage, he was a prominent figure among his younger generation. If he reported this matter to the village through his own channels, I believe that even if Uchiha was not isolated for investigation, he would be quickly transferred away from the front line where Shinryu was stationed. Moreover, if he did so, Shinryu could even openly request to be transferred away from the front line or have additional guards added to his squad. After all, that would make him an assassination target for the enemy. Yes, it sounds tempting, but Shinryu finally didn't do such a thing. It has nothing to do with a change of heart. It's just that if Shinryu really did such a thing, then his relationship with the Uchiha clan would probably be irreconcilable. No matter that in a dozen years, this Konoha clan with all its members suffering from the second-year syndrome will be wiped out overnight, but at least for now, this behemoth is still the most powerful force in Konoha besides the Hokage lineage. Even if the importance of the eagle to the Uchiha is far less than that of Shinryu to the Senju, even for the sake of face, the Uchiha probably won't let it go. That would be a real problem. After all, if it came to that, Shinryu wouldn't even know who was going to deal with him. It's better to maintain the status quo. Okay, but if we were to just let it slide, given Shinryu's personality, he'd probably have to hold his breath. No one likes a teammate who's always thinking about killing them. Even if she's a woman, even if she's a beauty, even if she has big tits. Ahem, I digress. Combing himself, Shinryu reluctantly made his way to the main tent in the center of the camp. Just after calling it a day, he received instructions from Tsukumo. It seemed they had another mission. Notice, the stern-faced Hokage Tsukumo used the word them. This couldn't possibly make Shinryu happy. Oh my god, this meant not only did he have to go out with Uchiha, but he also needed Tsukumo's help on this mission? Then can you tell me exactly what level of mission it is? Dividing line for behind enemy line missions. Letting 3 brats infiltrate behind enemy lines and destroy vital facilities? They're courting death, aren't they? Even if the enemy truly hasn't noticed, aren't there any guards stationed there? Why is Shinryu so upset? Because the battle strategy assigned to them this time is practically identical. Captain Hokage Tsukumo will be the primary target, wreaking havoc behind enemy lines, engaging in guerrilla warfare to further distract the enemy, while Shinryu and his 3 companions are tasked with burning down the enemy's granary. To achieve this, they've prevented the distribution of large quantities of detonating tags, and specially selected the Hokage squad, which includes members of the Uchiha clan. Okay, to sum it up, this mission essentially involves Shinryu and his 3 companions infiltrating behind enemy lines, relying on a woman hell-bent on killing Shinryu, to burn down a major granary right under the enemy's noses. Finally, return alive or die? Fuck you, Shinryu declared that he had no other way to handle a mission scroll like this except to throw it in anger. Chapter 23, Find a good friend before becoming a god. Well, if Shinryu had the choice to make over again, he'd definitely think of a more reliable strategy than Earth Escape. Leveraging Minato and Tsukumo's Earth Escape abilities, they'd smoothly penetrated the enemy lines. Aside from the daily grind and the unappetizing grind, everything was fine. But today, Tsukumo would be operating separately from them. Remember, your objective is to burn down the granary. Any actions beyond that are superfluous. Although they'd only been together briefly, Tsukumo had been providing constant guidance to Shinryu and the others, guidance through actual combat. At least, according to Shinryu himself, his once clumsy close combat skills had recently begun to develop into his own unique style. After all, in a sense, the 3 of them could be considered assassins who favored quick bursts of attack, with few true ninjutsu masters. This perfectly suited Tsukumo's style, though, so far, Shinryu and the others hadn't witnessed Tsukumo's full power. That's not the point. From now on, it's really up to Shinryu and the other 2 to do this on their own. Seriously, what the hell were they thinking? Putting 3 little Chuunin brats on the front lines, and giving them such a daunting mission. Ugh, this is terrible. Shinryu subconsciously glanced at the still stoic Uchiha. That undisguised chill and murderous intent gave Shinryu a headache. Anyway, since we're going to act alone, shouldn't we 3 elect a temporary captain? Shinayu spread his hands, reluctantly accepting the necessity of the mission. If they wanted to pull it off, finding a suitable captain was essential. From simple attacks and retreats to detailed tactical planning and command, the team's safety depended heavily on the captain's abilities. And let's be clear, having idiots and traitors in the team doesn't really matter. What matters is that these idiots absolutely cannot be captain. Shinayu subconsciously shuddered. It seemed like there was someone not far from him who was constantly plotting his own death. No. Wait. That makes the problem seem simpler. For the three of them, choosing Shinayu as captain would inevitably lead to opposition from Wu. The same was true in reverse. If Wu chose Shinayu, Shinayu wouldn't be able to carry out the mission with peace of mind. So, the only option was Minato. At that moment, Minato's image became infinitely taller in Shinayu's eyes, and Shinayu was so excited that he almost cried. How important is having a good friend? I recommend Shinayu as captain. Minato turned his head and smiled at the surprised Shinayu. No, are you kidding? Of course. Minato's signature smile had no effect this time. Shinayu felt he wasn't cut out for it, and Wu, well, that was the only comment he made to Shinayu during the whole trip. Okay, just calm down and listen to me. Little son reluctantly maintained his smile. It was obvious that, as Shinayu's best friend, he understood the situation before he even said a word. We all know that Shinayu possesses exceptionally keen insights. He can even warn of everyday crises. I think, when operating behind enemy lines, the importance of this ability is self-evident, right? Minato's tone had gradually calmed down. Only now did Shinayu realize why little son would become the Fourth Hokage. In such unfavorable circumstances, while Shinayu hadn't completely lost his mind, one thing was certain. From the day he stepped onto the battlefield, he became somewhat hysterical, just like the playful smile on his lips. This was definitely not Shinayu's usual habit. If anything, compared to those who trembled in fear at the sight of death, Shinayu seemed to have fallen into the other extreme. Thinking back on that neurotic state now, it was rather creepy. But this only solidified Shinayu's resolve to refuse the captaincy. Minato had made him captain out of trust, and being captain meant taking responsibility for the lives of all the team members, whether it was Uchiha or Minato. No, I can't do it, no. Minato slammed his hands down hard on Shinayu's shoulders. In that moment, he was practically right in front of him, so close that Shinayu could hear his breathing and heartbeat clearly. Yes, he could feel that unfeigned emotion, a genuine, trusting, willing heartfelt feeling. You can do it. Yes, you can. A slightly relieved smile appeared on the corner of Jinayong's mouth. Compared with the original residents of this world, he already had too many advantages. Fear of danger, fear of responsibility, just selfishly and greedily wanting to keep himself alive. If these were all the things that Jinayong could do before, then he really had forgotten a lot of important things. From the chance encounter at the entrance ceremony, from the time Minato became his brother, from the time they first adventured together, his life had gained something that was more than the weight of his original life. It was not a question of whether he could do it. Jinayong closed his eyes slightly, and a moment later, the eyes that appeared in front of everyone again shone with a kind of brilliance that did not exist before. It must be done. Chapter 24, Rapid Massacre. What's the most important thing about a mission behind enemy lines? Speed. In the age of the information economy. I mean, in the age of war, speed is the same as life. As the old veteran, Hoin Evil God, said it well, all martial arts are invincible, except for speed. With enough speed, Shinayu and his team can disengage immediately after completing their mission, leaving the danger zone before the enemy's pursuers arrive. Well, actually, given the circumstances, Shinayu prefers a commanding, head-on approach. Well, isn't this mission inherently timed? Can't Shinayu wait until he reaches cage level before carrying it out? Having accepted the captain's assignment, Shinayu decisively ignored Uchihatsune's easily discernible sneer and calmly considered his next course of action. He'd never claimed to be intelligent, and truly intelligent people would never say such things. Just like seemingly meaningless things like witty tactics, they actually have their own value. If you're going to do something, plan everything in advance. Shinayu isn't the type to act impulsively, so his previous risky attempt with Minato to rescue Kushina could almost be considered madness, but the war had pushed Shinayu into a desperate situation. Simply advancing slowly and systematically, waiting until they reached their target area before taking action, didn't seem like a wise plan to him. Putting aside the possibility of all the opposing ninja suffering from diarrhea, would the enemy actually allow 3 Chunin to infiltrate a crucial strategic facility? Even if Shinayong and his men were lucky enough to infiltrate and successfully destroy the granary, how would they get out? Such a drastic move would undoubtedly expose their whereabouts, and there was no way the enraged sand ninja would let them escape unharmed. In that case, rather than waiting to die, it was better to take a risk and try their luck. Soon, a mad plan was outlined in Shinayong's mind, and the first step was a frenzied massacre. He did not explain anything to Minato or Uchiha Eagle. He just took out a prepared sealing scroll and put several corpses that had begun to rot into it. Let's go. I'll tell you the details on the way. My work from now on will probably be much more complicated. Shinayong divided the scroll into 3 parts. Everyone got 2. He finally confirmed the process of action and then took a deep breath. Listen carefully. The following is the captain's order. Within 12 hours from now, we have to do only one thing. You can say it is a demon in your heart, but now it seems that this has become a habit that Shinayong has developed in recent days. The corners of his mouth once again climbed up that playful smile. Massacre. The order has been issued, so the 3 of them took action immediately. At the border between the 2 warring countries, under the nose of the Wind Country army, Shinayong began to lead his 2 teammates in a crazy hunt. Any Supreme Ninja team with less than 5 people could not escape the attack of this team. In reality, only 7 hours had passed since the casualty report was delivered to the nearest Sans Shinobi stronghold, when a guerrilla squad consisting of 1 Jonin and 2 Chunin had already set out. Their sole objective was to crush Shinayong and his men to pieces. Meanwhile, as a hunter, Shinayong was keenly aware of the shifting local situation. Indeed, his actions undoubtedly exposed him to the enemy's clutches. And the enemy would undoubtedly dispatch even more powerful ninjas to defeat them. All of this was within Shinayong's expectations. On the battlefield, still some distance away from Shinayong and his men, the Sand Shinobi had long forgotten what lay behind them. Not far from the main battlefront, the sudden arrival of the God of Death completely disrupted the Sand Shinobi's plans. Almost all of the puppet troops were slain by the terrifying dagger, and the commander originally assigned to guard the station decisively ordered a retreat, without even waiting for reinforcements. He proved right, leaving only 2 survivors for the station, a force of 102, including 21 Jonin. His only regret was that he himself hadn't escaped the terrifying dagger. As the Sand Shinobi's frontline commander frantically searched for Konoha's main force, the world received a shocking answer from the 2 survivors. There was only one enemy, a white-haired man holding a dagger. Of course, most of the time, all you could see was a cold white light. He ran quickly beside everyone, and you couldn't even catch the edge of his clothes, but his head had already been cut off. He was a ninja of Konoha, the most ferocious fang of Konoha. Chapter 25, Please whip me. The mission is still going on. Compared to the thriving situation on White Fang's side, Shinayong's side is much more difficult. Now, the first step of the plan has been completed. The other party has probably sent out a search team, right? According to previous situations, the team that comes to hunt them down is either composed of an absolute number of Chunin, or a small number of Jonin. Elite Jonin and above should not waste time on such things. Judging from the trumpets during this period, the other party probably won't be willing to use the first of the 2 speculations. After all, if being dragged into war is not their wish, then... Listen, during this period, there will probably be a Jonin leading a team to hunt us down. Shinayong calmly told Minato and Eagle about their situation. This situation is not good, but from another perspective, this is also their only chance to complete the mission. We'll have to go deeper, but remember, once you come into contact with the enemy's Jonin squad, don't hesitate, leave as quickly as possible. Remember, don't worry about the situation, leave immediately. Sneak into the nearest enemy military station. As for the timing of the infiltration, you'll need to decide for yourself. But don't worry, you don't need to defeat them from the inside, just act according to the plan. In 3 days, Shinayong took out the sealing scrolls he had prepared for a long time from his arms. There were 12 in total. He gave them to Minato and Eagle respectively. After explaining the details, the operation began. That's right, as if heading towards death, the 3 young Chunin began this absolutely impossible mission, the dividing line of unequal combat. To be honest, Tada had originally been reluctant to be stationed in such a place, but thinking about the puppet troops on the front lines, he almost instinctively shrank back. If you were assigned to that unit, He had no confidence in escaping the daggers of Konoha White Fang. On the contrary, as long as he performed his duty as guard in the granary well and made no major mistakes, he would still easily receive his share of the credit after the war. Found them, the team's sensory officer was a Chunin. While his frontal combat prowess wasn't reliable, he was incredibly skilled at locating the enemy. Where are they? 100 meters ahead, heading towards us. What, did they spot the target before us? Ridiculous. But it didn't matter. Judging by their combat power, they had at most 3 elite Chunin, while this side had 1 sensory ninja, a Jonin, and an elite Chunin. Even without preparation, Tada was confident he could wipe out the squad in a flash. No, that's not right, I'd overlooked something. Where's the other one? Here, it was a calm voice. There was neither the nervousness of a first battle nor the thrill of bloodlust. Normally, only a seasoned veteran could possess such a unique voice. For a moment, Tada felt he wasn't facing an elite Chunin, but that terrifying short sword. Innate time control. Triple speed. How much could physical training improve speed? In reality, the Jonin's movements left the Jinan barely time to react. But if broken down into specific numbers, it was only 3 or 4 times faster. That difference alone was enough to create a near-crushing difference in strength. This is why Minato, having mastered the Flying Thunder God, is considered the strongest Hokage. That wasn't just speed, it was true teleportation. So, how much of a difference was there between Shinayu's current speed and that of the Jonin? Double? Or maybe even double? It didn't matter. The important thing was that Tada couldn't keep up with Shinayu's speed. He didn't even have time to react. A simple straight thrust, a single swipe of the kunai, and a burst of crimson sprayed through the wind. Blood. That was blood. Tada almost subconsciously touched his throat. The blood was not his, but the elite Chunin next to him was not so lucky. In just a moment, his world fell into darkness. Even the Jonin could not escape the assassination. How could he be spared? Don't move. It was still that calm voice. Shinayong's kunai, the kunai still stained with the enemy's blood, had almost cut the throat of the sensory Chunin. The battlefield is indeed the best place to hone your strength. In just about a month, Shinayong can actually possess the ability to instantly kill a Jonin in such a short period of time. Cough cough. It's just that the preparation time and sequelae are a little more serious. Don't move, he repeated it again, and then said something that surprised Tada very much. I surrender. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.